Each and every single disciple of the Yun Hai sect stood up and stared at Lin Feng, or more precisely, at his ring. They couldn't understand what was happening. Each and every single disciple of the Yun Hai sect stood up and stared at Lin Feng, or more precisely, at his ring. They couldn't understand what was happening. But at that moment, Lin Feng put his hand on his waist and said to the slaves, "Those willing to follow me, stand up." The hearts of these Yun Hai sect disciples were pounding. They were stupefied. Flashes of hope appeared in their eyes. That was the patriarch's ring. Lin Feng might be a disciple of the Yun Hai sect just like them. "I am willing to follow you." At that moment, a silhouette stood up and walked towards the edge of his cell. He looked excited. "I am willing to follow you. I also want to follow you." More and more people were standing up and expressing themselves. The whole situation stupefied the slave merchant. He was deeply surprised by the actions of these slaves. Why were so many people willing to follow Lin Feng? They would certainly bring about their own destruction. Could it be that they found living here so horrible that they had chosen death? Ba Dao and Yishui were astonished too and looked at Lin Feng, trying to get a hint of what was happening. Lin Feng had just said that he was looking for slaves to clear the path against some ferocious beasts. How could they be so willing to go with him? More than 30 slaves had stood up and were standing at the entrance of their cells. Lin Feng sighed with mixed emotions. The number of people who had managed to survive that day was quite important. They hadn't been killed on the spot, but their lives was far from being one of happiness. They had been made into slaves, and a great number of them had died in the prisoner arena. There were also many people that had been sold in the slave exchange previously. "Release them, I want to buy all of them," said Lin Feng indifferently. A light flashed in the slave merchant's eyes and he slightly nodded. Even though he didn't understand what was happening, he couldn't deny that someone buying so many slaves at once was a large amount of business. "Are you sure that you want me to release all of these slaves?" At that moment, the slave merchant wasn't smiling any longer, and was no longer trying to sell his slaves. He looked solemn and calm as if it was a completely different person. Lin Feng looked at the slave merchant in a strange way, but immediately after was relieved. The slave merchant was concerned that Lin Feng wasn't strong enough, and something bad would happen to him if he was unable to control the slaves. "Yes, I am. Release them," said Lin Feng while nodding. It was clear to him that the slave merchant was worried about him not being strong enough, which would be problematic if he did not have the power to control all of these slaves. But did Lin Feng need to keep them under control? "Since you have insisted, I will release them," said the slave merchant while nodding. The slave merchant moved to the large cell in which most of the slaves were inside and unlocked it. He then said, "Those willing to follow him, come out one by one. If you dare do something suspicious, you will die." When the slave merchant finished talking, a deadly energy emerged from his body and spread into the air. A light flashed in Lin Feng's eyes. How powerful! The slave merchant had broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer. It seemed like this person was a completely different person from the one a moment before. The slaves had their heads down and did not look anyone in the eyes. They were all moving out of the cell one by one so that each person could fit through the small door. Their hearts were pounding out of excitement. Very quickly, 32 people were standing by Lin Feng's side. "How many purity stones?" calmly asked Lin Feng. 8 slaves of the 1st Ling Qi layer, 9 slaves of the 2nd Ling Qi layer, 7 slaves of the 3rd Ling Qi layer, 5 of the 4th Ling Qi layer, 3 of the 5th Ling Qi layer, and none of the 6th Ling Qi layer. "That's 3,400 purity stones of medium quality," said the slave merchant after having counting the total in his head. Lin Feng slightly nodded. A light flashed, and at that moment, a thick pure qi emerged. In Lin Feng's hand appeared a huge number of purity stones. He can store things in a pocket of space. The crowd was stupefied. Lin Feng surprisingly could store things into a special pocket. That didn't seem like an easy thing for one to achieve. "You can count them if you would like." Lin Feng put all the purity stones on the ground while saying this. The slave merchant indifferently glanced at the ground and then immediately said while smiling, "No need to count. You can leave with your slaves now." "All right," said Lin Feng while slightly nodding. He turned around, looked at the slaves and said, "Come with me." When Lin Feng finished talking, he started walking. Those 32 slaves followed behind him as a group. Everybody's pace was surprisingly identical, and their formation was clear and neat, which surprised everybody that saw. It didn't seem like that group of people came from the slave exchange at all. The way they moved in formation was way too strange. They looked like Lin Feng's subordinates, calmly following behind him. The slave merchant of the slave market looked at the backs of the departing slaves, and a thought flashed through his mind. He then said, "Master, walk slowly." Walking on the large road with 32 slaves would obviously attract everybody's attention. How could people outside not see the marks that the slaves had on their faces? Besides, they were still within the slave exchange. If they were outside, then they would draw even more people's attention. In a mansion not far from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, Lin Feng, Ba Dao, Yi Shui and 32 slaves were cultivating. The place they were training was a rocky terrain. There was a pavilion in the middle with a small bridge, flowing water and even a small lake. This was the mansion that Lin Feng just recently bought. He spent 500 purity stones of medium quality to buy the mansion, which was incredibly expensive. Lin Feng needed a place for the slaves to stay. The Celestial Academy wasn't his after all. Even if he could enjoy all the benefits of the academy, he couldn't draw everybody's attention by walking in with so many slaves following him. That would not have been appropriate. Each and every slave from the Yunhai sect was looking at Lin Feng. They were curious to know who he was. They were very troubled by not knowing who it was under the mask. They all wanted that mask to be removed so they could see the face underneath. Who could be wearing the Patriarch's ring? Lin Feng calmly glanced at the crowd and said, "You've gone through a lot of hardships." While talking, he put his hand on his mask. The heart of the people in the crowd started beating faster. Lin Feng then slowly took off his mask. Boom! Seeing Lin Feng's face made the group completely shocked. Everybody knew the young man who was wearing the Patriarch's ring. It was Lin Feng. That was the unique, exceptional and frivolous Lin Feng. Back in the days of the Yunhai sect, Lin Feng had stood out because he had killed the elite disciples and he defeated top-ranking elite disciple Wen Renyan. He was like a conquering hero. In the life and death arena, he had made the Patriarch regret his actions and reflect upon his mistakes. How imposing was he when reprimanding the Patriarch? Lin Feng had become a source of hope for the future of the Yunhai sect. Everybody thought that, sooner or later, Lin Feng would make the Yunhai sect rise again to new heights and regain its place in the Shuiyu country. But the Yunhai sect, instead, had been the victim of a tragedy. And at that moment they could see Lin Feng again. Their hearts were beating from just looking at the wonderful disciple of the Yunhai sect standing there alive. It was the young man who had refused Duan Tianlang's offer because he stayed true to his own convictions. They were infinitely touched and surprised by his actions. Lin Feng was still alive. Lin Feng had freed them from their slave status and took them from the slave exchange. They wouldn't have to live as slaves again and could regain their humanity. They wouldn't be enduring pain and humiliation on a daily basis. No need to look at me that way and no need to be too excited either. Don't forget that your faces still have the mark of the slave carved into them. Your hearts are still filled with an endless shame," said Lin Feng when he saw that the crowd was growing excited. Lin Feng's coldness quickly ended the excited feelings that had begun. That's right, they still had the mark of a slave carved into their face, so they still had the status of slave. Have you forgotten how our sect was destroyed? How you forgotten the people who carved these letters into your faces? Said Lin Feng coldly. The crowd was filled with hatred. They hated Duan Tianlang. He was the one who had destroyed the Yunhai sect. They were marked as slaves because of him. He had made them become slaves. Because the Yunhai sect was weak, it was destroyed. It didn't have the power to even defend itself. As far as you are concerned, you are weak. That is why you have the mark of a slave carved onto your face. This is why you were humiliated each day, said Lin Feng. He then slowly added, if you do not have enough strength, you will never break free from your status as a slave. You will, as before, remain slaves and could even get taken away just like an animal. Lin Feng's words were not pleasant to hear, but every single sentence made their heart beat even faster. Lin Feng was right though. If their strength didn't increase, they would never be able to change their destiny. If you are sick of being bullied and humiliated, if you want to change your destiny and not be a slave for your entire life, if you want to hold a festival to celebrate the end of your past hardships and humiliations, there is only one way, said Lin Feng, whose voice was becoming louder and louder. while looking at everyone in the crowd. He then spat out the following words: "Become stronger. Unceasingly stronger. Only the strong can change their destiny. Become stronger." All of these Yun Hai sect disciples were turning red, with anger boiling in their hearts. Lin Feng was right. If the Yun Hai sect had been strong, who would have been able to destroy it? If they were strong enough, they would have never had the mark of a slave carved into their faces. Become stronger. All of these Yun Hai sect disciples were turning red, with anger boiling in their hearts. Lin Feng was right. If the Yun Hai sect had been strong, who would have been able to destroy it? If they were strong enough, they would have never had the mark of a slave carved into their faces. Exceptionally strong cultivators could annihilate a whole sect and even a country. This is what only the really strong cultivators could do. They could shake both heaven and earth. However, the weak of the world could only get bullied to the extent that they would become slaves and be treated like animals. This was the fate of the weak Yun Hai sect. Lin Feng looked at the crowd and felt that his words had the desired effect. They were all clenching their fists to the extent that their tendons could be seen on their arms. Their hearts had been filled with shame. Now they truly knew what the words humiliation and shame meant. They understood that, in this world, the weak would always be at the mercy of the strong. If their determination and willpower became stronger, then they would also grow much stronger too. Suddenly a few agility techniques and martial skills appeared with a wave of Lin Feng's hand. They were from the temple of the Yun Hai sect. Now that he had become the patriarch, he needed to help the disciples become stronger, so they needed to have access to these skills. Nan Gongling, before dying, appointed me as the new patriarch of the Yun Hai sect. All of these martial skills and agility techniques are at the Xian level. You can look for a few which would be suitable for you. Once you find one, just go and practice it to perfection. Lin Feng laid these skills and agility techniques on the floor. Everybody was stupefied. Martial skills and agility techniques were extremely attractive to any cultivator. A few of the disciples rushed towards the agility techniques and martial skills to choose, but many people stayed in their initial position while staring at Lin Feng. "Get back!" Lin Feng moved forwards and released a burst of qi and force into the air, which surprised the people who had already rushed forward to greedily choose their own skills. They all raised their head and looked at Lin Feng. "Damn it, I said get back!" Lin Feng's pupils shrank. He looked extremely cold. This group of disciples didn't understand why Lin Feng was losing his temper, but they all moved back towards the other disciples who were patiently waiting. Patriarch. Amongst those who hadn't moved a moment before, there were some who suddenly decided to bow and give face to Lin Feng. The ones who rushed forward understood and bowed to Lin Feng as well and said, "Patriarch." Lin Feng coldly looked at the crowd and said indifferently, "You have all disappointed me." When they heard him, the crowd was stupefied. "I don't want to hear you all call me patriarch. I just want to see how many of you can control your hearts when faced with greed." Someone who is just interested in satisfying their own interest and their own greed will never be able to gain a strong heart. They will never take into consideration the others around them, and will only work to satisfy their own desires. "I'm telling you, you're a bunch of idiots," Lin Feng said very impolitely. "I don't know if it's because you've been slaves for too long, but some of you no longer have honor and integrity. Do you think that I released you so you could greedily help yourselves to skills without showing the slightest bit of respect or consideration? Do you think that I wanted to hear you shout patriarch to satisfy my own ego? Do you think I want people who will only call me patriarch because I am the one with the power? What happens if the person with power changes? You all disappoint me." Lin Feng repeated himself again. The cheeks of the Yun Hai sect disciples who were bowing to Lin Feng felt like they were burning. "Do you think I owe you something? I spent thousands of purity stones to buy your freedom. Could it be that you think I did this so you could continue to think of your own interests? Do you think I bought you so you could continue without a sense of integrity and honor? Do you think I need people who forget to show gratitude to those who show them kindness? If I teach you to only care about yourself and how to grow stronger, then in the future, you might just end up selling out your comrades or even me. If I taught you that, then you would be no better than the people who made you slaves." Lin Feng stared at the crowd and continued, "Of course, because you have been living like animals, you may have forgotten what it is to act like a decent person. What I said just now is only to remind you of what it means to be a good person. You need to remember that in the future you will need to think about others and be selfless, or you may end up dead in the future. Remember that I don't want to hear any bullshit and I have heard enough from moronic people already." The people in the crowd looked at Lin Feng and slightly shook their heads. They had realized that their hearts had truly started to become selfish. "Remember that you will be judged on your own choices," said Lin Feng. Immediately after, he turned around and started walking away while saying, "You can choose from any of the martial skills and agility techniques on the ground. You are not allowed to leave the pavilion. Use that time to meditate and train. In 3 months' time I will come back." Lin Feng started leaving while Yishui and Ba Dao were calmly following behind him. "Ba Dao, you stay here too," said Lin Feng to Ba Dao. A martial skill appeared in Lin Feng's hand and he handed it over to Ba Dao. He then said with a soft tone, "Ba Dao, that martial skill is perfect for you. Take it, learn it and practice it. If any of them try to run away after receiving their skills, kill them." When Lin Feng said the word kill, a strong killing intent could be felt from him. Ba Dao and Yishui were stupefied when looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked expressionless and continued to walk, leaving the mansion. Lin Feng only thought about the future of the Yun Hai sect from the beginning. This world was definitely a selfish and cruel world. These people were the former disciples of the Yun Hai sect. He had spent a fortune of purity stones to change their fate, and had given them agility techniques and martial skills for only one reason: the Yun Hai sect. Lin Feng had saved them, but if they had chose to run away with the skills or continue to live selfishly, then Lin Feng would kill them. If they showed no gratitude and had no honor, then he would remove them. If they had chosen to run away and steal from the Yun Hai sect, then they should have thought about it. They would have known they were betraying the mercy of Lin Feng and the Yun Hai sect itself. Even if they were former disciples of the Yun Hai sect, why would Lin Feng need people who only thought selfishly and did not care about the Yun Hai sect or the kindness that Lin Feng had shown them? The former disciples in the mansion were the new generation of the Yun Hai sect. Lin Feng wasn't going to abandon them, but he was not going to let his sect be corrupted. Ba Dao, who had stayed behind, was watching Lin Feng's back as he left. He then started looking at the martial skill that Lin Feng had given to him. It made him shiver. Tyrannical Blade. A blade attack of pure energy. D-level martial skill of lower quality. Pure energy is released from the user in the form of blade which annihilates anything in its path. Tyrannical Blade. D-level martial skill of lower quality. Ba Dao whispered these words to himself as if he did not believe it. That martial skill seemed to be perfect for him. Besides, it was a terrifying technique of the D-level. Ba Dao raised his head again and looked at Lin Feng's back. Lin Feng's heart was mysterious and unfathomable, but one thing was sure. He was an extremely intelligent person and he definitely had a very good nature. He had confidently given that martial skill to Ba Dao. He had faith in Ba Dao and trusted him, even though they had spent such a small amount of time together. Ba Dao was very moved by the trust that Lin Feng had shown him. He could never repay the kindness which Lin Feng continued to show him. Lin Feng returned to the Celestial Academy. He first brought Yishui to a suitable living quarters, and then immediately went to the peach orchard where he could hear a pleasant zither melody playing. Lin Feng had said 3 months to the slaves. This was not just for their cultivation but his as well. He wasn't going to forget his own cultivation for his battle against Mo. At that moment, Lin Feng had broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer, and with his current power, he could defeat cultivators of the 6th Ling Qi layer. But Mo was at the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer. At the academy, those of a similar level couldn't even compete with him. Even many cultivators at the 7th Qi layer didn't dare to fight against him. Mo was extremely powerful and could cross the gap in power between the layers. Mo was one of the 10 strongest students of the Celestial Academy, and considering his talent, that was a well-deserved title. Besides, who could say that Mo hadn't also become much stronger in these 3 months? Was he supposed to stay the same level for Lin Feng to catch up? Lin Feng's strength wasn't sufficient. He lacked in many areas compared to Mo. Mo could defeat a cultivator of the 7th Ling Qi layer with confidence, but Lin Feng would come close to death when fighting against one. He had defeated 2 cultivators of the 7th Qi layer. However, one had greatly injured him and the other had fought with someone. Like in the restaurant, if Ba Dao hadn't helped him, the man in the gray robes would have been very difficult to defeat alone. This is why Lin Feng went to the peach orchard to find serenity. Once he found serenity within his heart, he immediately headed towards the cultivation tower. What Lin Feng needed the most was to increase his cultivation. At that moment, Lin Feng didn't go to the higher floors at all. He immediately went to the 4th floor. Only by stepping on the floor, he could feel the deep and intense pure qi of heaven and earth fluctuating around him. It was extremely pure. Some people who passed the 4th floor saw Lin Feng who had stopped. It looked like he was looking for a training room within the cultivation tower. However, he was currently acting strangely. They didn't understand if Lin Feng was a new military student, since he didn't seem to understand how things worked. On the 4th floor, one thing that was important to know, each room was reserved by someone and the room was only used by them. In other words, each room on the 4th floor belonged exclusively to someone. Even if they weren't there and the room was empty, nobody would enter them. Therefore, when Lin Feng was checking the 4th floor, he surprisingly found that there were 2 cultivation rooms which were empty. Nobody was practicing inside them. Even more surprising was that the people who were passing by didn't stop and continued walking. In the middle of these 2 rooms was a stone tablet which had the word, forbidden. Next to that was a name. Forbidden. Forbidden. Lin Feng was reading the words written on stone which made him smile indifferently. The cultivation tower was one of the resources the Celestial Academy provided. It was there so that all of its students could benefit from it. Strong students could go to the cultivation rooms on the lower floors and have priority over other people, but preventing other people from entering a cultivation room while not being there was much too exaggerated. Could they really prevent other students from accessing the resources of the academy when they are not even using them? Lin Feng stretched his hand and with a flick of his wrist, his qi erased the name on the stone. He didn't even look at the name that was written next, forbidden. Whoever that person who thought they owned the room wasn't important. That room was not being used, that was the main thing. Lin Feng took out his purity stones and placed them inside the hole to activate the room. At that moment, a light appeared from inside the room. The door of the cultivation room opened itself while emitting a loud rumbling noise. At that moment, a thick pure qi emerged which made Lin Feng feel both happy and comfortable. He took a deep breath. At the moment when Lin Feng was about to move inside the cultivation room, someone shouted, "Stop!" When Lin Feng heard that shout, he stopped and turned around. He saw a beautiful woman who was walking towards him. Surprisingly, it was a girl. She was wearing revealing clothes and looked very seductive. She was very slender and her waist was swinging with each of her steps. Each of her steps made her entire body look demonically bewitching. Her manner of walking looked both soft and smooth. A light flashed in Lin Feng's eyes. As far as that woman was concerned, her beauty wasn't equal to that of Lu Fei. Even though her body was very similar to Lu Fei, it was much more enchanting than Lu Fei's body. While walking, her back was straight and her chest was pushed forward. She looked very flirtatious and her waist was slender. Her forearms were folded comfortably under her chest. She could easily make most people burn with lewd desire. From the front, Lin Feng could even see her cleavage protruding from her clothes. Her snowy white bosom was very large. She looked very alluring. She simply looked perfect. If that woman had been a model in the previous world, she would have been internationally famous. Lin Feng was secretly talking to himself. Lin Feng suddenly controlled and made his heartbeat slow down again. His determination and willpower as a cultivator was very strong. He could control all of his bodily functions much better than ordinary people. Haven't you seen what's written by the door? This room is mine. The girl had a light smile on her face, but her eyes revealed a certain coldness. She actually looked insufferably arrogant. I really haven't seen anything. Lin Feng was speaking in a cold and detached tone. The girl took a few steps and looked at the stone between the rooms. Obviously, her name and the words forbidden couldn't be seen anymore. They had disappeared. Someone had completely erased them. Did you do that? The girl frowned while asking that question. At that moment, Lin Feng could feel the cold qi she released. Since you can carve things into the stone, why can't someone erase things from it? Replied Lin Feng indifferently without openly admitting that he was the culprit. She was looking at Lin Feng, then suddenly, a bewitching and alluring expression appeared in her eyes which surprised Lin Feng. Immediately after, The girl walked towards another cultivation room and suddenly punched its door, which emitted a loud noise. Huh. Lin Feng looked surprised. What was that girl doing? Why was she attacking the door of somebody else's cultivation room? What surprised Lin Feng the most is that she didn't stop hitting the door. She moved towards another door. Then she punched the other stone door, which made it slightly shake. Loud noises spread through the air. A door slightly opened. A cold and detached voice spread through the atmosphere. An extremely cold chi emerged from the room. Who is it? Immediately after, the two people came out of their respective cultivation rooms. They were stupefied to see the alluring girl waiting for them. Deep in their heart, they were annoyed, but the cold expression on their face vanished. With a big smile on their face, they said, "Jiao Jiao, what's the problem?" "Zuning, someone is bullying me." That girl was trying to look lovely so she could manipulate these two young men. She was holding onto one boy's arm while her large chest gently pressed against the other's body, which made the one called Zuning become frozen. He then started looking at her body, looking like a crazed pervert. Their willpower and determination on the path of cultivation was high, and they could easily stop themselves from losing their mind because of a woman's beauty. They both wouldn't lose themselves in her beauty. However, once in a while they liked to enjoy carnal pleasures. People who would openly refuse such things were rare. Especially at the Celestial Academy, it was said that nobody had ever enjoyed being with this bewitching beauty. Yu Jiao was a gorgeous girl. The other young man, when he saw that Yu Jiao was pressing her breasts against Zhu Ning, looked extremely jealous. Yu Jiao made him drool with lewd desire. Unfortunately, he had never had the chance to be with her. At the Celestial Academy, the person who managed to spend a night in bed with her would become very famous. Kucheng, that guy is surprisingly using my cultivation room. He even deleted my name from it. He is bullying a weak little girl like me. Yu Jiao moved away from Zhu Ning and then got very close to Kucheng. She grabbed Kucheng's hand and hugged it tightly. Kucheng's forearm was in contact with her entire voluptuous body. Kucheng had the impression that he was imploding with desire. Lin Feng was still calmly standing at his original place watching this scene unfold. That girl was using her body as a weapon. She had managed to arouse both Zhu Ning and Kucheng. They were both fixedly staring at Lin Feng, getting ready to fight for Yu Jiao. "Trying to use Jiao Jiao's cultivation room was a reckless act on your part," said Zhu Ning in a loud voice while coldly staring at Lin Feng. "Hehe, what an uneducated animal. Don't you understand the rules here?" said Kucheng while smiling coldly, unwilling to lose against Zhu Ning. "Reckless? Animal?" Lin Feng's expression was slightly cold. He looked at the two guys with a cold smile. They wanted to use Lin Feng to show off in front of this girl? Yu Jiao giggled and released Kucheng's arm. She then said while smiling, "I'm free tonight. I don't know if either of you would be interested in joining me in my room, so I have someone to talk with." Zhu Ning and Kucheng were stupefied and glanced at each other. A smile appeared on their faces. Even if she had said it would only be to talk with them, it was already a very good start. They might even have the opportunity to enjoy carnal pleasures. "Are you going first or should I?" asked Zhu Ning to Kucheng. "We're of course going together," said Kucheng with a cold smile on his face. If he said he wanted to go first, how could Zhu Ning accept? "That's precisely what I thought," said Zhu Ning while smiling coldly and said, "Well, let's see who can kill him first. How does that sound?" "All right. The first to kill him wins," said Kucheng while nodding. Immediately after, the two students looked at Lin Feng with clear killing intent and then quickly rushed towards him. Sixth Ling Qi Layer. These two guys were releasing a cold qi and force into the atmosphere so Lin Feng could determine their strength. They had broken through to the sixth Ling Qi layer, but they were still infinitely weaker than Ba Dao or Hei Mo. They still had a great deal to learn about cultivation. Boom! A terrifying energy invaded the atmosphere. Zhu Ning and Kucheng's silhouettes were moving at incredible speeds. "Get out of my way!" Suddenly a voice shouted, which stupefied Lin Feng. Zhu Ning, who had started moving towards Lin Feng at the same time as Kucheng, was suddenly punching towards not Lin Feng but Kucheng. "I knew that you would do something like this sooner or later," said Kucheng while also attacking Zhu Ning. At that moment, an extremely strong wind emerged separating the two bodies from each other, but immediately after, they started moving shoulder to shoulder towards Lin Feng. However, they both remained extremely vigilant of the other. Lin Feng was calmly standing there looking at the two students who were attacking him at the same time. The expression in Lin Feng's eyes clearly showed that he found this scene to be ridiculous. They were enemies and were fighting each other, and at the same time they were also joining force to attack Lin Feng. Two stormy waves of energy vibrated in the air. Zhu Ning and Ku Cheng looked at each other again, and immediately after they both punched towards Lin Feng. Suddenly, a piercing force moved towards Lin Feng at full speed. Zhu Ning, who was on the right side, had a hideous grin on his face. His left hand thrust out attacked Ku Cheng. They were both using their right hand to attack Lin Feng. At that moment, Ku Cheng was on Zhu Ning's left. If Ku Cheng wanted to attack Lin Feng, he had to dodge the strike from Zhu Ning. Ku Cheng groaned and shivered. He increased his speed even more to dodge Zhu Ning's attack and rushed forwards. "His life is mine," said Ku Cheng with a hideous grin on his face. The palm of his hand was about to reach Lin Feng, but at that moment, a vast sword force suddenly burst out while emitting a whistling sound. It was extremely sharp and gave the impression of death. It was terrifying. That sword force made Ku Cheng's body become frozen in fright. A glow of light suddenly emerged in the air. In that bright resplendent light, a thick and gray deadly qi was floating. "This doesn't look good," said Ku Cheng, whose facial expression drastically changed. How was this possible? He knew all the strong military students, but he had never seen Lin Feng. How could Lin Feng be so strong? Besides, how could he control such a powerful sword force? Zhu Ning was one step behind Ku Cheng, and his expression had also drastically changed. He suddenly stopped moving and froze in place. That young man was strong. He could sense the terrifying power of that bright and resplendent glow. Retreat. That was Ku Cheng's only thought at that moment. He didn't want to attack Lin Feng. He had looked down on Lin Feng. He had attacked him alone because he wanted to avoid Zhu Ning's attack. He hadn't been given any time to think. When he stopped and wanted to retreat, that bright and resplendent sword glow had already reached him. Ku Cheng was gasping with astonishment. He regretted that he had taken the initiative to attack Lin Feng alone. He was attentively looking at the resplendent sword which had finally reached him. Immediately after, his head no longer had a body to call its own. Boom 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 boom. Zhu Ning and Yu Jiao's heartbeats could be heard, resounding through the atmosphere. They were fixedly staring at the corpse of Ku Cheng on the ground and were shaking with fear. Beheading Ku Cheng without a second thought had taught them a good lesson. A lesson which needed to be paid in blood. "You killed Ku Cheng." "Inside the cultivation tower?" said Zhu Ning while staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at Zhu Ning as if he was joking. When they wanted to kill him, they didn't care that they were inside the cultivation tower, but when they found out that he was stronger than them, they immediately remembered the rules. It was as if they had selective memory when it came to them killing people. "Not only did I kill him, but I will also kill you." Lin Feng's words coldly flowed from his mouth. He then slowly started walking towards Zhu Ning, whose heart started violently pounding. Yu Jiao was staring at Lin Feng. Her bewitching look had disappeared. Now she only looked like a scared little girl. Yu Jiao was staring at Lin Feng. Her bewitching look had disappeared. Now she only looked like a scared little girl. A moment before, the qi which Lin Feng had released was only at the 5th Ling qi layer. But he knew how to control sword force to perfection. He had killed Ku Cheng because Ku Cheng had underestimated him. He hadn't really paid attention to his opponent. However, it was undeniable that Lin Feng was very strong even without this fact. Indeed, his strength was enough to threaten some cultivators at the 6th Ling qi layer. Yu Jiao frowned. She had never seen Lin Feng either, which is why she had despised Lin Feng for removing her name, but because of her carelessness, Ku Cheng had lost his life. Yu Jiao giggled and said, "Zhu Ning, Ku Cheng was so useless. He underestimated his opponent. Even though that guy knows how to control forces, a cultivator at the 6th Ling qi layer is definitely able to defeat him," said Yu Jiao with a gentle smile on her face. She had first told him that Ku Cheng was useless and that he had underestimated the opponent, but then she told him that a cultivator at the 6th Ling qi layer could definitely defeat Lin Feng. Since one had already been killed, this was weird logic. Zhu Ning frowned. Even though he knew that Yu Jiao was trying to incite him to fight, he also thought that what she said was true. Could a cultivator at the 5th Ling Qi layer defeat him because he knew how to control forces? Zhu Ning looked irresolute for a few seconds, and then the fear disappeared from his heart. He blinked and instantly became ready to battle once again. Zhu Ning, could it be that you're scared because Keqing died? Yu Jiao's voice sounded strange. Zhu Ning was stupefied. He gnashed his teeth and while looking at Lin Feng he said, "How could I be scared? He's just a brat at the 5th Ling Qi layer, that's all." Lin Feng smiled coldly and said jokingly, "Why are you still standing there then?" Zhu Ning was stupefied by Lin Feng's confidence and coldness. An ugly expression appeared on his face. His heart started beating faster. At that moment, a pair of eyes appeared behind Zhu Ning. They were hovering mid-air and looked like the eyes of an eagle. They looked extremely sharp and fierce. From the moment that the pair of eyes appeared, Zhu Ning's expression also became strange and evil. "It's his spirit." Lin Feng was astonished. What was floating behind Zhu Ning was obviously a spirit. However, what shocked Lin Feng was that he had never seen such a spirit. Lin Feng was surprised, but he knew that the continent of the 9 clouds was vast. Lin Feng just didn't know exactly to what extent. The Shuiyu country was just one of the countries in the continent. There were, in total, 4 empires in 9 countries. This was only the Shuiyu country, an ordinary country. The number of spirits he had never seen were almost infinite. Roaring thunder. Lin Feng's sword slightly vibrated and he thrust forwards. Thunderous roars were spreading through the atmosphere with his attack. Zhu Ning's 2 strange eyes were staring at Lin Feng. Surprisingly, he remained motionless and was waiting for Lin Feng to make the first move. He just slightly turned and avoided Lin Feng's attack with extreme precision. At the same time, Zhu Ning raised his hand. He thrust his hand forward, which gave a similar feeling to the spirit. It was emitting a sharp resplendence as it moved straight towards Lin Feng's eyes. This was a truly diabolic attack. Lin Feng's long sword made a buzzing sound as it rotated in the air to block the attack. Zhu Ning's body simply moved to another angle with his hand still rushing towards Lin Feng's eyes. Lin Feng slightly crouched and jumped backwards using his moonlight feather agility. Then, without hesitation, he started his next attack. His sword started to glow as it moved as swiftly as thunder towards Zhu Ning. "Your sword probably wishes it had met another opponent and not me," said Zhu Ning in a cold tone. His body slightly moved, and he avoided Lin Feng's attack again. However, this time it was very extremely close. An iota closer and Zhu Ning would have been struck by Lin Feng's sword. Those 2 eyes can predict my actions from my movements and help him dodge my attacks. My celestial spirit gives me a similar ability to see things as if they were in slow motion. Lin Feng sheathed his sword and started to think. His energy gradually became colder. He looked expressionless. His eyes suddenly became pitch black. When he noticed the changes to Lin Feng's body, Zhu Ning frowned. Lin Feng's qi had suddenly changed. Lin Feng looked completely void of emotion. This change made Zhu Ning's heartbeat faster. If Zhu Ning's eyes were strange and evil, Lin Feng's eyes at that moment were those of nightmares. They were cold, expressionless and didn't even look like something that should belong to a human being. "You say my sword wishes it met another opponent?" said Lin Feng with a deep tone. An extreme coldness suddenly moved towards Zhu Ning's body. The sword force was growing sharper and sharper. It also contained a deadly qi. "Deadly sword," said Lin Feng while unsheathing his sword, which looked like an illusion, as he threw himself towards Zhu Ning. Zhu Ning groaned and then a swift and fierce qi emerged from his strange and evil eyes. His body slightly flickered and dodged the sword attack. Fatal sword. Lin Feng still looked expressionless. His sword moved through the air again. He was now releasing a fatal qi. A fatal qi surrounded Zhu Ning's body as well, which made him feel like he had been frozen. Even though he was of the 6th Ling Qi layer, he didn't dare approach Lin Feng's sword. Sword masters who knew how to use sword force were much too powerful. His body transformed into an illusion. Lin Feng's fatal sword moved even faster, forming an arch-shaped trajectory in the air. He could still see it very clearly and avoid it with precision. At that moment, Lin Feng was fixedly staring at Zhu Ning. Through his eyes, Zhu Ning was moving extremely slowly, so Lin Feng could see everything very clearly and distinctly. Lin Feng could see Zhu Ning just like Zhu Ning could see Lin Feng's sword. Lin Feng's sword kept moving in the air. His sword was unceasingly moving to where Zhu Ning was. He was continuously changing the trajectory of his sword, making Zhu Ning retreat backwards. While looking at the sword, Zhu Ning kept moving backwards. A cold expression appeared on Lin Feng's face. He then said in a low voice, "It's the end." He sounded very calm and emotionless. His words were also filled with confidence. All of this made Zhu Ning's heart race. Immediately after, he had the impression that the sword force had completely vanished and nothingness had replaced everything around him. It wasn't cold anymore and there was no sharpness either. There was only one sword, an incredibly ordinary sword moving towards him. Zhu Ning was staring at that sword, and he didn't feel convinced. He was curious to see how that attack could end the battle. Zhu Ning slightly moved leftwards and then his pupils shrank. The sword was still aiming at his chest. His evil and strange eyes emitted a sharp light. Zhu Ning's body flickered again. He was staring at that simple sword. What shocked him was that Lin Feng's sword looked like a snake that followed him wherever he moved. There was absolutely no deviation and it continued to move towards his heart. Besides, what terrified Zhu Ning was that the sword was getting closer and closer. How's this possible? I couldn't have missed his movements. I have an eagle-eye spirit. Zhu Ning's heart was pounding. He suddenly realized that that simple-looking sword was actually the same deadly and fatal sword as before. The closer the sword was getting, the more Zhu Ning wanted to escape. He then realized that his spirit was willing to escape, but his flesh was unable to. Since he wasn't able to dodge, he raised his two hands to block. A swift and fierce energy emerged in the atmosphere, making Zhu Ning's heart drop. His face revealed that he had finally given up all hope. That energy was much more powerful than the endless force Lin Feng had released earlier. That ordinary sword was actually an energy attack. Lin Feng was also looking at his sword as it consumed the energy around it. It looked like force, but it was all the energy within the atmosphere which enhanced the attack power. Energy attacks were a mixture of all the qi and force present. It was delicate and subtle. This attack contained a perfect combination of all sword energy. Every time the attack looked simple but was extremely powerful. That was the magic of a real energy attack. Lin Feng's eyes returned to normal, and he didn't look expressionless anymore. Instead, there was a smile on his face. Energy fusion required for energy attacks was similar to using force. It was just the next level above forces. Depending how much a cultivator practiced, it was only possible to control energy attacks after having mastered a force to perfection. Besides, just like for forces, there were different levels of mastery. At that moment, Lin Feng had only reached the first level of mastery with his fusion of energy. At that moment, Lin Feng's sword didn't penetrate into Zhu Ning's body in an extraordinary way. It softly pierced into his chest, and in the blink of an eye, all of his internal organs were destroyed. Zhu Ning's eyes were blankly staring at Lin Feng. The evil and strange expression in his eyes disappeared. He then said his last words, "I regret so much." He only managed to say that before he died. Lin Feng looked expressionless. Zhu Ning's body collapsed lifelessly on the floor with blood flowing from his chest. Lin Feng then turned his attention towards Yu Jiao, sending shivers down her spine. Lin Feng had killed Keqiang. Maybe the reason was because Keqiang had underestimated Lin Feng and he was also fighting against Zhu Ning at the same time. Lin Feng had killed Keqiang. Maybe the reason was because Keqiang had underestimated Lin Feng and he was also fighting against Zhu Ning at the same time. However, Zhu Ning had witnessed Keqiang's death personally. It was obviously impossible for Zhu Ning to go easy on Lin Feng. He had to use his maximum strength from the beginning, which he did. Zhu Ning directly released his eagle spirit and fought at his maximum ability. Nonetheless, Lin Feng still killed Zhu Ning. Lin Feng, relying on his strength of the fifth Ling Qi layer, had suppressed Zhu Ning's body until he had become unable to escape, and then killed him with a simple sword strike. That guy is so strong. He even killed Zhu Ning. How come I've never seen him before? Many people had already gathered on the fourth floor. They were whispering all sorts of comments between themselves. They had all seen how Lin Feng had killed Zhu Ning in one sword strike, which seemed completely simple. You don't know him? That's surprising. His name is the name that is currently spreading through the academy. Lin Feng. Yu Jiao looked stupefied. 16 or 17 years old, An authentic swordmaster, frivolous and extremely confident. When Yu Jiao recalled all the things that were said about Lin Feng, her heart started beating faster. Fifth Ling Qi layer and he could kill Keqing and Zhu Ning. And I've never seen him before. That guy has to be Lin Feng. Yu Jiao was feeling a bit shocked. She had, just like Keqing and Zhu Ning, broken through to the sixth Ling Qi layer. But she wasn't a match for either of them. If she had fought against Lin Feng, he would definitely kill her too. Lin Feng was holding his sword with the tip pointed at Yu Jiao, which made her tremble with fear. Her eyes revealed a terrified expression. We are not enemies. If you want my cultivation room, I will give it to you. There is no need to harm a weak girl such as myself. Yu Jiao was smiling and trying to seduce Lin Feng with her charms. He just smiled coldly. That girl could still smile and flirt even under these conditions. She was so manipulative that it was scary. Initially, there was no hatred between you and me, but a moment ago, if I had been a bit weaker, I am afraid that I would be the one lying dead on the ground right now. You say that there is no need to harm a weak girl like you? Don't you think that's ridiculous? Said Lin Feng coldly while continuing to walk towards her. Well, what do you want? Asked Yu Jiao. Cripple your cultivation, said Lin Feng, sounding detached. Even if it was a beautiful girl, she had to pay for her behavior. Crippling her own cultivation. Yu Jiao was shaking in fear. Practicing cultivation all the way to break through to the sixth Ling Qi layer had been incredibly difficult. Would he really have her cripple her own cultivation? Life would become torture. Aren't there any other solutions? Asked Yu Jiao with a flirtatious gaze. There isn't any, replied Lin Feng with absolute resolution. Yu Jiao's expression was rigid. While gnashing her teeth, she said, "Damn it." While talking, she had moved through the crowd and over to another cultivation room. She immediately punched the door, which emitted a rumbling noise. She then moved to another one and then another one. For rumbling sounds spread in the air. The crowd opened the way for Lin Feng. Lin Feng continued to walk. Immediately after, loud rumbling sounds emerged from the 4 cultivation rooms. 4 silhouettes appeared. On the 4th floor there were 8 cultivation rooms. 2 were already empty, those of Keqing and Zhu Ning who had been killed. As these 4 people had come out, all the rooms on the 4th floor were empty and everyone was now standing outside. But at that moment nobody dared to fight. For many people, the 4th floor was almost like a restricted area. Only those who had reached a certain strength could go there. Yu Jiao, what do you want? Asked a young man while frowning from inside one of the rooms. Somebody wants to kill me, said Yu Jiao. Kill you, said the 4 silhouettes who had just come out of the rooms, sounding quite surprised. Surprisingly, someone wanted to kill such an alluring woman. Somebody wants to kill you, what does that have to do with us? Said one of them as a joke while smiling. Gongluan, you really are heartless, said Yu Jiao while seductively smiling at the young man. She then smiled and said, Who will play with you tonight if I die? Play with me, said Gonglun with a demonic smile on his face. A light flashed in his eyes while glancing at Yu Jiao's body and he said, Even when you are alive, have I ever had the chance to play with you? Yu Jiao looked at Gongluan with a seductive look in her eyes and said, If you really want to play with me, just do one thing for me. Oh, said Gongluan with the same evil smile on his face and said, Don't count on me to do something impossible though. Of course I won't. I just hope that you can help me kill him. If you can, I will let you play with me tonight, said Yu Jiao while giggling with a seductive look. The crowd's thoughts were filled with lust when they heard what she said. Yu Jiao was really a treasure to behold. Same for you 3, if you kill him, I will sleep with all of you, said Yu Jiao to the 3 others while pointing at Lin Feng. Gongluan and the 3 others had lust burning in their eyes. That offer was very tempting. If I am not mistaken, Keqing and Zhu Ning must have been killed by him. You want us to kill him, will it not be dangerous for us? It is forbidden to kill in the cultivation tower, said one of them with a wry smile while looking at Yu Jiao. Indeed, he killed them. He has broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer and can control sword force. He is a really strong cultivator who can fight above his own cultivation. He surprisingly dared to humiliate me. He stole my cultivation room. How should I have reacted when seeing such a thing? That's why I asked Keqing and Zhu Ning to fight against him. But these 2 pieces of trash surprisingly fought each other, and Keqing was immediately killed. Then Zhu Ning was alone, so he ended up falling to his sword. He's broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer and can control sword force? Gong Luan didn't sound convinced. After all, he hadn't seen Lin Feng fight the others as he was cultivating inside a sealed room. If he was really strong enough, then he would already be on the 3rd floor. Yu Jiao knew that Gong Luan meant that Lin Feng was not strong enough to go to the 3rd floor. At that moment, Lin Feng looked at these people and said in a cold and indifferent tone, "Are you done talking shit?" Huh. Gong Luan frowned while staring at Lin Feng. "If you're done talking shit, open the way." A cold aura emerged from Lin Feng's body and he released a deadly sword qi. Gong Luan was surprised, but very quickly, a smile appeared on his face. As expected, he had only broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer and relied on his sword force. That was barely enough to defeat ordinary cultivators of the 6th Ling Qi layer. But Zhu Ning and Kuchang were really trash. They had been killed by such a weakling. "Don't you think that you are a bit too arrogant?" said Gong Luan while smiling and continued. "It's a fact that you have broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer, which is not weak, but in our eyes, it is still not enough. If you think that because you defeated Kuchang and Zhu Ning you can defeat us, well, I will tell you now, you are a fool. Zhu Ning was far from being as strong as us." "Are you done talking?" said Lin Feng indifferently as if he hadn't heard what Gong Luan had just said, which surprised Gong Luan. A cold light flashed in Gong Luan's eyes. Lin Feng wasn't giving him any face. "If you're done talking, then move before I make you move." Lin Feng walked and released an even colder aura. "How irresponsible." Gong Luan looked incredibly murderous and said, "Yu Jiao, remember what you just said? If you kill him, I will definitely sleep with you tonight and you will be the happiest man in the academy." Yu Jiao smiled as she spoke to the 3 other students. "Same for you, if you kill Lin Feng, I will sleep with you." These 3 students had lustful smiles appear on their faces as they evilly looked toward Lin Feng. They started walking slowly towards Lin Feng, looking at him with pure killing intent. Lin Feng had broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer. It was impossible for him to fight against all of them. "You don't understand the rules, stealing other people's rooms and even killing people here. Killing is against the rules. I will kill you for violating the rules," said Gong Luan while staring at Lin Feng. "I don't understand the rules? Could it be because I decided to use a room which you wrote forbidden on even though nobody was using it? Isn't that your own rule? When they tried to kill me, I ended up killing them in return. How do I not understand the rules? How do you decide who has broken the rules here and who has not?" said Lin Feng coldly. "Strength decides," said Gong Luan while smiling coldly. "Only those who are strong can make their own rules. The strong cultivators can write forbidden above a room. So you will not be allowed to enter. You managed to kill those 2 pieces of trash, which will not be a loss to the academy. Now you are going to die too, and the academy will again not care about losing trash. That is the rule created by the strong." "I understand," said Lin Feng with an indifferent smile. He started walking and like an illusion, a sword came out of nowhere. That sword looked ordinary and did not have anything outstanding about it. There was no sharp sword force coming out of it, but in the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Gong Luan. Gong Luan smiled when he saw Lin Feng's sword being thrust towards him. A deadly energy suddenly appeared and oppressed his body. His heart suddenly started pounding. He was staring at the sword moving towards him. He tried to dodge, but before he could move, he could only look down at the pain in his chest. The smile had already completely disappeared from his face. His face only expressed pain and agony. There was just the handle of a sword sticking out of his chest. The sword had already pierced through his body. Gong Luan had been killed without being able to even fight. "I like these rules," said Lin Feng indifferently. His words resonated throughout the 4th floor. Everyone's heart started to pound. So these were the rules of the strong. 1 sword strike, a single thrust, and Gong Luan had been killed by Lin Feng. He wasn't able to fight anymore, as a sword had been lodged deep in his chest. 1 sword strike, a single thrust, and Gong Luan had been killed by Lin Feng. He wasn't able to fight anymore, as a sword had been lodged deep in his chest. The crowd couldn't even understand what had happened. That sword had been too quick. Besides, no force or qi had been released with the sword. That simple and ordinary sword had been enough to take Gong Luan's life. What terrifying strength! The crowd was looking at Lin Feng's sword, which was still inside Gong Luan's corpse, as it hit the ground. He had broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer and could easily defeat Keqing and Zhu Ning, so why was he now laying dead on the floor beside them? They obviously didn't think that Lin Feng's sword attack was ordinary. That was a confrontation between two strong cultivators, and they knew that they couldn't understand the mysteries behind that sword strike. The 3 other students who were next to Gong Luan started shaking. They were moving backwards as they stared dumbfounded at Lin Feng. A moment before, when Gong Luan was still there, they wanted to fight against Lin Feng, but he had killed Gong Luan in a single strike. Their hearts began to fill with dread. If that sword hadn't been used against Gong Luan but against them, would have they been able to dodge it? The answer was that they would be lying dead on the floor. Gong Luan was the strongest of all of them, so if he wasn't able to withstand a single attack, they were the same. But at that moment, Lin Feng slowly turned around and looked at the 3 students. Their hearts were beating even faster. Are your rules the same as his? Lin Feng's tone was cold. They were blankly staring at Lin Feng. One of them smiled and said, "Friend, don't get angry, I mean you no harm. If you need a cultivation room, just feel free to choose one." "Friend?" questioned Lin Feng. He then said, "Don't think that I am blind and couldn't see you standing with him a moment ago ready to attack me. There is no need to be a coward now and embarrass yourself." These students were stupefied. Indeed, the way they had behaved clearly indicated that they didn't differ from Gong Luan at all. They had replied to Yu Jiao's offer with killing intent towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng wasn't blind, so he saw it all. Retreating for them would be pointless, they were trapped. "Friend, if you need purity stones, just let me know. And you can use any of the rooms of the 4th floor," said another of the 3 students. Since they couldn't run, they had to try and negotiate. "First, I have enough purity stones. Second, I will use all the rooms on the 4th floor as I wish." "Is such nonsense necessary?" said Lin Feng indifferently, which made the 3 of them grow even more terrified. The last remaining one said, "Well, what do you want from us then?" "Cripple your own cultivation," said Lin Feng indifferently. The 3 students were astonished. A cold sweat ran down their backs. If they crippled their cultivation, they would become worthless, and they would be several times weaker than a normal person. They could be humiliated by anyone. A cultivator who had never provoked others didn't exist, and if their cultivation was crippled, that would be the end for them. The crowd was also shocked. If they crippled their own cultivation, that would be a fate much worse than death. But if they were in Lin Feng's position, then they would do the same. They had wanted to kill Lin Feng a moment before, and Lin Feng wanted to teach them a lesson. "I can give you another opportunity though. If you cripple her cultivation first, then you will be exempted from crippling your own cultivation," said Lin Feng indifferently while pointing at Yu Jiao. Yu Jiao was stupefied. A moment ago, she wanted them to kill Lin Feng and had offered them her body. However, it was now Lin Feng who was asking them to cripple her cultivation. When Lin Feng finished talking, the 3 students looked at Yu Jiao with murderous intentions. They were also vigilant to not get attacked while doing so. "I will only give you the time it takes for 10 breaths. If you don't do it by then, I will cripple your cultivations." Lin Feng just said this one sentence. At that moment, the 3 students instantly released their energy at the same time. They all quickly rushed towards Yu Jiao. In front of them was their lamb for slaughter, Yu Jiao. Yu Jiao was scared to death. Being attacked by the 3 of them, who were all much stronger than her, was terrifying. When Lin Feng had spoken, her fate was already sealed. Or maybe, it had already been sealed when she tried to humiliate and kill Lin Feng. A horrible shriek filled the 4th floor. Lin Feng didn't even look in the direction of the shriek and calmly said, "Take her away and remove these corpses. After that, I don't want to see any of you on the 4th floor ever again." These 3 students were shocked. Immediately, they took the corpses along with Yu Jiao, who did not even have the strength to stand by herself anymore. And then they left. While walking, they were still looking at Yu Jiao with a very cold look. That girl had almost cost them their cultivation. Fortunately, they hadn't rushed towards Lin Feng like Gong Lin. Otherwise, they would be dead. Her cultivation had been crippled. She was now crippled for life and could not even live a normal life anymore. This was no joke. Lin Feng ignored them as they left. He walked towards a room with forbidden written on it. A smile appeared on his face. "Since these are the rules, I will also follow the rules," Lin Feng said as his hand moved over the words and vigorously erased them. Immediately after, Lin Feng stretched out a single finger and a light emerged from the tip. In the blink of an eye, the word Linge appeared. Lin Feng then moved to the other 7 rooms and did the same. The entire 4th floor had been seized by Lin Feng. The crowd was blankly staring at Lin Feng and remained silent. That guy was extremely powerful and incredibly daring. Even if Lin Feng hadn't been there, none of these rooms would have belonged to them because only the strong could use these rooms. That was the rule. The weak cultivators had nothing to say. Lin Feng, relying on his strength of the 5th Ling Qi layer, had easily killed people at the 6th Ling Qi layer. Besides, he had made other people at the 6th Ling Qi layer obey him out of fear. How majestic! Until I erase my name from these rooms, you are not able to enter any of these rooms. They are all mine, and if anyone enters them, then the consequences will be serious, said Lin Feng, sounding extremely powerful. He then immediately went inside Gong Luan's room. A rumbling noise was heard while the door closed itself. The pure qi was emitting a bright and resplendent light as the door slowly closed itself. When they saw how bright and resplendent the light was inside, they understood that Gong Luan had put enough purity stones inside to cultivate for a long time. Lin Feng didn't need to spend anything. At least, this would be enough to last until his fight against Heimo. The pure qi on the 4th floor was extremely thick and pure. Lin Feng had the feeling that all his pores were wide open and absorbing the qi. He felt carefree and relaxed. He had the feeling that his body was hungry and thirsty for the qi. He wanted to swallow all that pure qi inside his dantian. Lin Feng was sitting cross-legged, and he was using his celestial spirit as he entered in a state of mediation. That pure qi circulated around all of Lin Feng's limbs, bones, blood vessels and muscles. They were all becoming stronger as they absorbed the pure qi. Besides, Lin Feng wasn't aware of it, but the pure qi in his body was also becoming more and more refined. While practicing cultivation, the notion of time didn't exist. Lin Feng had no idea that his name was becoming more and more popular in the Celestial Academy, and that his battle against Heimo was getting nearer and nearer. Early in the morning there were no clouds for over 1,000 miles. The Celestial Academy was bathed in sunlight. A layer of warmth covered the entire area. Early in the morning there were no clouds for over 1,000 miles. The Celestial Academy was bathed in sunlight. A layer of warmth covered the entire area. At that moment, many people had gathered in one of the public squares as if they were waiting for something. There was a gigantic fighting stage that had been erected in that public square. On its edge, a viewing platform had been constructed. The viewing platform was huge and made from bluestone. The height of the viewing platform reached 5 meters and its width 100 meters. On the viewing platform, more than 100 chairs had been created as well. From these chairs, it was possible to see the fighting stage perfectly. What's going on? It looks like there's going to be a great battle, said a person who just arrived at the public square with a puzzled expression. Could it be that you don't know what day it is today? It is the day of the fight between Lin Feng and Heimo. I wouldn't have thought that the academy would build such an arena for the occasion though, said another person to his side. Everyone was puzzled by these events. In the Celestial Academy, challenges were very common. The people of high status in the hierarchy usually didn't care except for when prodigious students were involved. They liked to watch battles involving prodigious students. However, the scenery at that moment was unprecedented. Hehe, it seems like there are many things that you don't know, said another person moving towards them while smiling. He then said, first, Lin Feng went crazy in the Bai clan's prisoner arena. Then, he killed one of the Bai clan members who was at the 7th Ling Qi layer. He then liberated some of the slaves that were inside the cage. He even made a public spectacle of the Bai clan. He slaughtered all of the Bai clan members which came to the academy to apprehend him, except a person at the Xian Qi layer. His reputation quickly rose to new heights. There is no one who does not know of his name inside the academy. Then, there is another rumor saying that Lin Feng, while wearing a silver mask, went back to the prisoner arena and killed Mu Fan of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. He won a demonic fire lion, which he then sold it in the auction market. What? You're saying that the mysterious person wearing a silver mask was Lin Feng? Said the 2 other students while looking stupefied by what they had just heard. Surprisingly, that was Lin Feng as well. How is that possible? Not many people know about that. I also know that if you compare the man in the silver mask's temperament and insane attitude, all of these things resemble things of Lin Feng. It must be him, continued the student while looking proud of himself. When he came back, Lin Feng then went to the 4th floor of the cultivation tower, killed Zhu Ning, Ku Cheng and Gong Luan. He scared 3 other students of the 6th Ling Qi layer so much that they escaped. He completely humiliated them. He then seized all of the 8 rooms on the 4th floor of the cultivation tower. He doesn't let anyone use the 4th floor anymore. He's brutally strong. Nowadays at the academy, nobody is as famous as Lin Feng. There are even people who say that few students of the 6th Ling Qi layer can defeat him. They even say that Mo cannot possibly defeat him. How powerful, whispered the 2 other students. He had killed a strong cultivator of the 7th Ling Qi layer. He had easily killed Zhu Ning and some other students of the 6th Ling Qi layer. He was so strong that the entire 4th floor of the cultivation tower already belonged to him. Could it be the rumors were true and that Mo, one of the top 10 students of the academy, had already been surpassed by him? The battle was definitely going to be spectacular. But why did they build all these viewing platforms? What does that have to do with the story about Lin Feng? That is a very complex question. Lin Feng is almost more popular than Mo. There are even some people who say he is much stronger than Mo. How could Mo, who is one of the top 10 students of the academy, remain indifferent? Arrogant as he is, he probably wants to prove to everyone that he is stronger. Therefore, he took the initiative to make the battle a public event. This time his clan will come. He will use this battle to gain prestige and power. Besides, the first time that Lin Feng went to the prisoner arena, not only did he provoke the Bai clan but he also had a confrontation against a young man whose family name was Yu. That is not all. The second time that he went to the prisoner arena, he offended some students of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. Amongst these people there was another person whose family name was Yu. These 2 young men of the Yu clan will come here as well as the members of the Bai clan, and some people of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. When that student finished talking, the 2 other students were astonished and their heart was beating faster. The Bai clan, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, Mo's clan, people of the family Yu, were all coming to watch the battle. That was going to be a magnificent battle. No wonder the Celestial Academy had built that fighting stage and viewing platform. There was even a row of seats at the level of the ground, which was probably destined for visitors of high status. They were getting more and more impatient to watch the battle. They grew so excited they could not wait any longer. The sun gradually rose higher in the sky and the Bai clan, the people of Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu, Mo's clan, as well as some people of the Yu clan arrived at the Celestial Academy to watch the battle of Lin Feng and Mo. At an incredible speed, the public square of the academy was already packed with people. Even though Lin Feng and Mo hadn't even agreed on a precise time, the only sure thing was that the battle was supposed to happen on that day. At that moment, a silhouette appeared on the edge of the public square. The person was walking slowly towards the stage. That person was wearing a black robe and his entire body was covered with a cold and evil qi. The expression on his face looked profoundly dark. Each of his steps was filled with determination. Mo. When they saw the person approaching, the crowd started whispering all sorts of comments. The person who had just arrived was Mo. At that moment they only saw Mo step onto the fighting stage. He then sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. He wasn't looking at the crowd, it was as if they were all invisible to him. Adopting such an indifferent and cold attitude was one way of making other people feel ashamed of their inferiority. That wasn't easy though, to remain indifferent while tens of thousands of people were all watching you. Mo was one of the 10 best cultivators of the Celestial Academy, and had already reached the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer. His spirit was the rare black flame spirit. Even cultivators of the 7th Qi layer didn't dare fight against him. Only those who had already fought against Mo could tell how terrifying his strength was. Even though he was ranked 10th, the person above him in the rankings didn't dare provoke him. Mo was very dangerous. At that moment, far away, many silhouettes were moving towards the fighting stage. They were an extremely large group. Amongst them, there was a middle-aged man who was wearing purple clothes. Behind him were 2 young men. If Lin Feng had been there, he would have recognized them. One of them had been smashed into his stone chair by Lin Feng, and the other was a student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, the one that had convinced Mu Fan to go and fight against the demonic fire lion. Behind these three people was a large crowd of people. They were obviously members of the Bai clan. The middle-aged man in blue clothes who had violently criticized the holy courtyard of Shuiyu had also come. Yu clan. Some people in the crowd surprised. Even though they had never seen the middle-aged man before, the crowd knew that the two young men standing next to him were indubitably members of the Yu clan. The Bai clan members were all walking behind them. The Yu clan and Imperial clan were both standing at the top as the most powerful clans. No matter what, whether it be the prisoner arena or the auction market, the Yu clan always had to give their permission for the business to operate. In the Imperial City, apart from the Imperial clan, the Yu clan and the Wanshou men sect, nobody could compete with the Yu clan. The Yu clan was very discreet and quiet, as if they didn't care about external affairs, which gave even more power to the Yu clan. Walking on the left side, there was a group of people wearing the same clothes in which two words were written in big letters: Holy Courtyard. They belonged to the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. On the right side was a group of young men wearing black clothes. Each and every single one of them looked ice cold and had a cold chi emerging from their bodies. That was the Nye clan of the Imperial City. They were a very special clan. They didn't look like the Yu clan in terms of influence, but nobody dared provoke them. There wasn't a single weak cultivator that belonged to the Nye clan. While the large group of people approached the public square, a gigantic and oppressive force fell down onto the crowd, which made them gradually calm down until silence had completely invaded the atmosphere. Visitors, please accept my most sincere apologies. I wasn't able to come pick you up. A voice emerged through the air. Immediately after, a silhouette came down from the sky. Using an agility technique, his silhouette disappeared and landed in front of the Yu clan and the other visitors. The man in purple clothes frowned and looked at Vice Principal Long. He was upset. Vice Principal Long, how imposing, how arrogant, said the young man in purple clothes indifferently. Obviously, he was referring to the fact that Vice Principal Long hadn't been very polite while descending from the sky. Mr. Yu's prestige is vast and mighty. He can act just as arrogant as me. Vice Principal Long was fighting with a small verbal confrontation. Immediately after, he pointed towards the viewing platform and said, "Please take your seats and let's watch the battle." The man in purple clothes groaned coldly and walked towards the viewing platform. The man in purple clothes walked towards the main seat thinking that it was definitely reserved for him. The man in purple clothes walked towards the main seat thinking that it was definitely reserved for him. The Yu clan had a strong influence. Even though Vice Principal Long wasn't polite to them, he had to give them the main seat, otherwise he would make them lose face. But at the moment when they were about to sit down, they heard Vice Principal Long said, "Mr. Yu, you cannot take that seat." "I cannot take it?" The man in purple frowned. He looked in the direction of Vice Principal Long and said, "Long Ding, if I cannot sit here, who will? I can only tell you that that seat is reserved. Whether you still want to sit there or not is your own choice," said Long Ding impolitely to the man in purple while pulling up his sleeves. Immediately after, he sat down on the seat next to the main one. The man in purple clothes was hesitant. If Long Ding had sat down on the main seat, he would have been extremely angry, but Long Ding hadn't. He had sat down on the seat next to the main one. That made the man in purple hesitant. Could it be that someone extremely important was going to come, to the extent that Long Ding himself couldn't take the main seat? Could it be because of him? A realization flashed in the man's mind and a silhouette appeared in his thoughts. He surprisingly didn't insist, groaned coldly and sat down on the other seat next to the main seat. The members of the Celestial Academy calmly watched the scene from the viewing platform. They were wondering what was going on. It seemed like Vice Principal Long and the Yu clan were not on good terms. They were not friendly to each other, and their conversation always sounded like an argument. It almost seemed like they hated each other. The members of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu as well as the Nye clan members were not sitting separately from the others. The crowd didn't know if it meant something or not. The members of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu sat down next to Long Ding, and the other members of the Celestial Academy. Vice Principal Long, I heard that the Celestial Academy had 10 extremely strong disciples. As the holy courtyard of Shueyu is now created, I was thinking that there could be a competition between the two institutions. What do you think? In the middle of the crowd belonging to the holy courtyard of Shueyu, the person took the initiative to ask a question which surprised many people belonging to the Celestial Academy. The holy courtyard of Shueyu had been created by selecting some of the most outstanding disciples of the biggest sections. Even 2 of the 8 high officials, who were incomparably strong, had joined it. Even though the students of the Celestial Academy were extremely strong, how could they compete with the best disciples of the biggest sects? The Haoyu sect, the Yunhai sect, the Wanshoumen sect and the Ice and Snow Mountain village were all very influential in the Shueyu country. They had made some of their students achieve extremely high levels of cultivation, and the strongest of them had moved to the holy courtyard of Shueyu. The holy courtyard of Shueyu was indubitably extremely powerful. If the Celestial Academy fought against them, they would definitely lose. My Celestial Academy is too weak. We still need to improve a lot to be able to compete with the holy courtyard of Shueyu. We try to become stronger step by step, but you selected the best students from the best sects and put them in one place. There is no need for such a competition. We are much weaker. Long Ding said these words while sounding like he was making fun of the holy courtyard. The Celestial Academy was too weak, but it was improving step by step and relied on its own strength. The holy courtyard of Shueyu had been extremely strong directly from the beginning, but it had taken its strength from other sects. That wasn't a good method. When the other person heard Long Ding, he immediately stopped talking. At that moment the crowd looked at the fighting stage. Heimo was still sitting there, remaining silent and motionless. Only one person hadn't arrived yet. Lin Feng. Time was passing and the sun was gradually getting hotter. It was already noon. What upset everybody was that Lin Feng surprisingly hadn't arrived yet. Long Ding, your student is very audacious, making so many people wait, coldly said the man in purple clothes as he grew impatient. Why had he made so many people come to wait for a child? Lin Feng and Heimo's battle is planned for today. They haven't agreed on a precise time, replied Long Ding indifferently. Today? So many people came today to watch that battle. Even everybody in the Celestial Academy knows about it and he's still not coming. What's that supposed to mean? Well, how do you expect me to know? When Lin Feng arrives you can ask him personally, said Long Ding sounding as unfriendly as before. The man in purple clothes wasn't the only one who was getting impatient. The members of the Celestial Academy were also getting impatient. They were unceasingly whispering. Lin Feng is really arrogant. He's surprisingly not coming. Maybe that he cannot fight, because he's not ready for the battle, said someone while smiling indifferently. Impossible. Even if he doesn't fight, Heimo will not let him off. Whatever happens, Lin Feng will not be able to hide. So this battle would be the best solution. Maybe he already ran away. Who knows? People in the crowd were all trying to guess what had happened with Lin Feng. No matter if they were right or not, only they could choose whether they wanted to stay and wait or leave. Unexpectedly, Heimo was still sitting there as if nothing could disturb him. The evening sun, floating in the west, had already appeared and was shining down upon the fighting stage, on which there was still only one person. How exaggerated! He had made them wait whole day. The crowd was getting more and more impatient. Besides, they were starting to get convinced that Lin Feng was scared and didn't dare come. Long Ding, will you not do anything about it? Said the man in purple clothes a little coldly. Lin Feng had made them wait the entire day. The day is not over yet, calmly said Long Ding while looking at the sky. On his side, the members of the holy courtyard of Shueyu looked impatient as well. How could a simple student of the Celestial Academy be so arrogant that he would make them wait so long? Lin Qian, you said that Lin Feng was your cousin? Asked a handsome man to Lin Qian who was in the middle of the crowd. Maybe it's not him, said Lin Qian while frowning. On that day at the prisoner arena, Lin Feng was wearing a silver mask, so Lin Qian still had doubts. She had, since then, heard that the man who was wearing the mask was called Lin Feng. She had been stupefied upon hearing the news. Therefore, she had come to the Celestial Academy to confirm with her own eyes. Even if it is, there is absolutely no problem. He is just a little kid of the 5th Ling Qi layer, nothing more. If I want him to die, he will die. If I want him to live, he will live, said the handsome boy in a cold and aggressive way. Lin Qian slightly smiled to the handsome man and said, "Thank you, Chu Zhanpeng." That man was precisely Chu Zhanpeng, the genius of the Haoyu sect. He was one of the 8 high officials of the Shuiyu country. At that moment, though, he had joined the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. At that moment the crowd became extremely loud. The crowd moved aside and a path appeared. On that path a silhouette was walking slowly. "It's Lin Feng. Lin Feng has arrived." Many people were surprised. They were really starting to think that Lin Feng didn't dare to come. They wouldn't have thought that Lin Feng would arrive so late in the evening. At that moment Lin Feng was wearing a white robe. He had a sword on his back. He looked clean and calm. Each of his steps was filled with determination. If one paid attention to his steps, one would notice that each of his steps was of the exact same distance as the one before. On the 5-meter-high viewing platform, everybody could clearly see Lin Feng's silhouette. They could see that clean, handsome and familiar face. Lin Qian's heart was pounding. She was shaking from head to toe as she stared at the person. Lin Feng, as expected, it really was Lin Feng. That was really him. Lin Feng used to be a piece of trash. However, at that moment, he had already acquired a great reputation. So many people had come to watch his battle. The holy courtyard of Shuiyu, the Mie clan and even the Yu clan had all personally come to watch his fight. Lin Qian used to enjoy the same kind of prestige before inside the Lin clan. Everybody attached so much importance to her that they had even expelled Lin Feng and his father from the Lin clan. Although she wasn't very famous, she had become a student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. But Lin Feng was already able to defeat cultivators of the 6th Ling Qi layer. Unlike her, who had only just broken through to the 3rd Ling Qi layer and was even very pleased with herself for doing that. Lin Qian's eyes revealed a complex mixture of expressions containing envy, jealousy and coldness. She had to kill Lin Feng. She couldn't let him go back to Yangzhou City. Otherwise, in the future, the Lin clan wouldn't have her as head of clan, but instead it would be Lin Feng. Mo opened his eyes as if he had sensed someone coming. A piercingly cold qi and force emerged from his body. He was staring straight at Lin Feng. Lin Feng was looking at Mo with the same cold glare. He was walking steadily towards the fighting stage. A cold and oppressive energy fell onto his body. Even though Mo was still afar away from him, Lin Feng could already feel the oppressive energy on his body. Following suit, Lin Feng released both qi and force from his body. It was extremely sharp. His qi and force were already rushing straight towards Mo. Even though Lin Feng was still far from Mo could already feel the sharp energy piercing him into his skin. Lin Feng hadn't even arrived on the fighting stage yet, and they were already fighting a battle of qi. Sword force. Sword force. When the crowd sensed Lin Feng's sharp force, they were stupefied. As the rumors said, Lin Feng could control sword force and was even a master at using it. Following each of Lin Feng's steps, the force was getting more and more powerful. The entire atmosphere was filled with sword force. Under the pressure from his sword force, people around him began retreating. At the moment when Lin Feng was on the fighting stage, an incredibly swift and fierce sword force whistled through the air towards Mo. One thing was sure, Lin Feng had come. Therefore, he and his sword were going to provide the spectators with a spectacular battle. Mo had already stood up. A gloomy and cold qi was emerging from his body. That whistling sword force from Lin Feng was unable to make his heart tremble even slightly. In Mo's eyes there were deep burning flames. At that moment he wanted to use Lin Feng's blood to become famous. The crowd was fixedly staring at the fighting stage. Even though Lin Feng had shown up quite late on this day, his incredible sword force had already made them forget about their dissatisfaction. This battle was definitely worth waiting an entire day for. How audacious! At that moment the man in purple, while looking at the fighting stage, said, "Lin Feng, you are very arrogant. You made us all wait an entire day, and won't even give us an explanation." His voice was very loud and intense. It violently resonated in Lin Feng's ears. He was blaming Lin Feng for making him wait. Lin Feng groaned. The energy around his body dispersed and he took 2 steps back. A moment before he had spared no effort, using force and qi to be able to compete with Mo. He had been concentrating on Mo only. He hadn't thought that the man in purple would suddenly make a despicable comment and very loudly interrupt him. At the same time when his focus was broken, Heimo's energy slightly penetrated into Lin Feng's body, which injured him a little bit. The crowd was stupefied and looked at the man in purple. How aggressive! That was an initial show of strength. Longding frowned. His eyes revealed that he was upset. At that moment Lin Feng, from the corner of his eyes, slightly looked at the man in purple clothes and the two young people sitting on his side. He quickly understood what was going on. He then coldly said, "Haven't I humiliated those two sitting by your side? If you want to avenge them, just say it clearly. There is no need to use such despicable methods. You really are shameless. I really don't understand what even gives you the right to sit there. You're just making a fool of yourself." When Lin Feng finished talking, the crowd was astonished. Lin Feng was really audacious. He was straightforward and his words were sharp and poignant. He even dared to talk in such an impolite way to members of the Yu clan, humiliating and insulting them. The pupils of the man in purple clothes shrank. He had thought that he would teach Lin Feng a lesson and that Lin Feng was just going to recognize he had made a mistake and apologize. He had thought that Lin Feng wouldn't dare refute his words. It seemed like his anticipation had been wrong. Lin Feng was much more aggressive than he had imagined. "What did you just say?" said the man in purple clothes with a cold expression in his eyes. He was an extremely important man in the Yu clan to the extent that even Longding somehow feared him, and a junior actually dared insult and humiliate him? "You say that I am audacious and that I made you wait the entire day and, on top of that, that I should give you an explanation. My battle against Heimo was planned for today, but we hadn't agreed on a precise time. Therefore, even though I came in the evening, it doesn't mean that I was late. I would like to ask you something though. Did I, Lin Feng, invite you to come?" Lin Feng was speaking coldly and continued, "Whether I fight or not is my own business, and whether you want to watch or not is your own business. You rushed over here to watch, yet you ask me for explanations. Why would I need to justify myself to you? Do I know you?" Lin Feng's words were so sharp that the man in purple clothes was really astonished. Lin Feng didn't stop talking and continued, "A senior watching a battle suddenly puts pressure on me. Don't you think that your behavior is that of a shameless person? Are you not losing face with your actions? I don't know which clan you belong to, but you are a disgrace for them. If I were you, I would be very embarrassed to be sitting in view of everyone." The crowd was utterly astonished. They were looking at the man in purple clothes in a strange way. It seemed like Lin Feng's statements were actually very accurate. Lin Feng hadn't agreed on a precise time and hadn't invited anybody to watch the battle. Coming to watch the battle was their own decision and had nothing to do with Lin Feng. That senior of the Yu clan was surprisingly blaming Lin Feng, which was quite inappropriate. The crowd agreed with Lin Feng, but nobody dared act like Lin Feng and say these things out loud in such a majestic way. The man in purple clothes had an ugly expression on his face, and then Vice Principal Long, who was sitting not far from him, said while slightly laughing, That kind of method is really low. The third most important man of the Yu clan is really majestic and powerful." Majestic and powerful. He had already heard so many words of insult. The man in purple clothes wanted to teach Lin Feng a lesson. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng would endlessly humiliate him in one sentence. Crack! The stone seat on which the man in purple clothes was sitting on cracked open. There was a deep fissure, but it hadn't broken into pieces. He was staring at Lin Feng, wishing he could kill him on the spot. Majestic and powerful. Indeed, I am really majestic and powerful. Lin Feng, if you lose today, Heimo will definitely kill you. And if you win, I will not let you off. No matter if you win or lose, today you are doomed. There was clear killing intent filling the eyes of the man in purple clothes. His voice was loud and aggressive. Everybody was stupefied. I am majestic and powerful. I am an extremely strong senior. I always get what I want. No matter the result of the battle, loss or victory, Lin Feng would die for having dared to provoke him. That was how majestic important senior members of the Yu clan were. Yu Qiu, it seems like you think that the Celestial Academy is your Yu clan. Here you cannot do anything you wish," said Longding coldly. Immediately after, he turned towards Lin Feng and said, "Lin Feng, you and Heimo fight. Don't worry, even though I cannot kill him, if Yu Qiu dares attack you, I can still kill the junior cultivators who came with him. What are you saying? Said Yu Qiu coldly. He stared at Long Ding and said, Vice Principal Long, you are threatening the juniors of the Yu clan? How shameless! When the crowd heard Yu Qiu, they were astonished. It was indeed majestic to be extremely powerful, but they hadn't thought that he could be so shameless. Long Ding was also astonished. He immediately said in a mocking tone, You threaten the juniors of the Celestial Academy, but don't allow me to threaten the juniors of the Yu clan? Yu Qiu, is your brain working correctly? Humph, groaned Yu Qiu, and then he said, Are you not scared of making the Yu clan angry? You are within the Celestial Academy, said Long Ding coldly while striving to get the last word. So what? I don't care if this is the Celestial Academy. Humiliating the Yu clan will lead to the destruction of the Celestial Academy, said Yu Qiu while sounding evil. The crowd was astonished. They had originally come to watch Lin Feng and He Mo's battle. They hadn't thought that they would witness Yu Qiu and Long Ding's confrontation, all because of Lin Feng. The crowd was very surprised by the turn of events. Besides, the entire crowd had become silent and was looking at Long Ding. Yu Qiu had threatened to annihilate the Celestial Academy. All of its members had become silent. Everybody was absolutely silent. Mr. Yu, you have a very bad temper. A voice emerged amongst the silent crowd. A silhouette walked in the middle of the crowd. That person had a warm and friendly smile on their face and looked very easygoing. Many people were astonished when they saw that person. Even Yu Qiu was shaking a little. As expected, the main seat had been reserved for him. When Lin Feng saw that young man, he was astonished as well. He had already seen him. He had accepted to be the referee for Lin Feng's battle at the prisoner arena. As expected, he definitely has a mysterious status. Lin Feng had also noticed the main seat, which was unoccupied. It was very likely that that seat was reserved for that young man. He even seemed to have a higher status than the man of the Yu clan. When Long Ding saw the young man, he smiled and stood up. Your Highness, said Long Ding extremely politely. Yu Qiu stood up as well. A smile appeared on his face and he said, Your Highness must be joking, I don't have a bad temper. If you don't, that's even better. Mr. Yu, Vice Principal Long, please sit down. No need to be so polite. That smiling young man was extremely polite and didn't sound arrogant at all for a prince. He had already arrived next to the main seat. At that moment, in the middle of the members of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, Chu Zhanpeng had an aggressive look in his eyes. He was staring at the young man. The young man turned his head and looked at Chu Zhanpeng. He nodded while smiling and said, Chu Zhanpeng, as expected, always exceptional. I salute your Highness. Chu Zhanpeng nodded and greeted the young man. His aggressive look gradually vanished. The second Prince Duan Wuya was just like him, one of the 8 high officials, and he was above him in the rankings. Lin Feng looked at Duan Wuya. Duan Wuya was the second prince of the imperial city. He had a soft and gentle temperament. He was kind and generous to other people. He wasn't arrogant at all. He was easygoing and approachable. If people were nervous and tense, his presence immediately made people calm down. Lin Feng looked at Duan Wuya. Duan Wuya was the second prince of the imperial city. He had a soft and gentle temperament. He was kind and generous to other people. He wasn't arrogant at all. He was easygoing and approachable. If people were nervous and tense, his presence immediately made people calm down. Duan Wuya was just like Duan Feng described him. He was completely different from Duan Wu Dao, the crown prince. Lin Feng didn't actually know how unruly the crown prince was though. That guy is powerful. Lin Feng was talking to himself. Duan Wuya was an extremely important person and he was also very strong, but at the same time he was also amiable and approachable. He was incredibly powerful and prestigious. Duan Wuya looked at the fighting stage, smiled and said, Alright, you two can continue to fight. I will be the referee. Lin Feng slightly nodded to Duan Wuya. The second prince had also already helped Lin Feng. Last time he had also acted as the referee for his battle at the prisoner arena. Lin Feng turned around and looked at He Mo. He Mo had had his eyes closed. What just happened had nothing to do with him. His only purpose at that moment was to kill Lin Feng and gain prestige. He wanted to prove to everyone that not just anyone could challenge him to a battle. At that moment, Heimo opened his eyes. A cold and profound light filled his eyes. Once more Lin Feng saw the black flames burning in Heimo's eyes. Lin Feng started releasing a very sharp sword force. Heimo was one of the top 10 disciples of the Celestial Academy. Lin Feng couldn't afford being careless. You have broken through to the 5th Ling Qi layer, and your sword force is very powerful. No wonder that you can kill cultivators at the 6th Ling Qi layer, but if that's all you are capable of, it will not be enough to fight against me. Zhu Ning, Gong Luan and the others, even though they had broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer, they were absolutely unable to compete with me, said Heimo very arrogantly while staring at Lin Feng. I also hope that you are as strong as you say, replied Lin Feng coldly. He took a single step forwards and his sword force became even more powerful. All right. I will try and see if you really can compete with a truly strong cultivator like me. When Heimo finished talking, he took a few steps as his silhouette flickered and disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Lin Feng and his fist was rushing through the air towards Lin Feng. Ice and sword. Lin Feng's palm moved. He was accumulated piercingly cold energy, as well as sword energy in his hand at the same time. Boom! Lin Feng was surprised. His body had been pushed back of a few dozen steps. He had almost reached the edge of the fighting stage. Lin Feng looked perplexed. He opened his hand and looked at his palm. In the center of his palm, there was a black mark caused by fire qi. It was extremely painful. What a dark fire qi, thought Lin Feng while shivering. When the opponent's fist collided with the palm of his hand, Lin Feng had clearly felt the overwhelming fire qi. It was completely evil. It wasn't violent or brutal but rather a ghastly fire qi. As expected, Heimo is much stronger than Lin Feng. Lin Feng was blown away in one attack. Thought the crowd when they saw that attack. Heimo wasn't one of the 10 best cultivators of the Celestial Academy for nothing. Lin Feng was sufficiently strong to kill other cultivators of the 6th Ling Qi layer, but in front of Heimo, he was just too weak. It seems like you cannot compete with me. You cannot even withstand a single attack. Today you will definitely die, said Heimo in an arrogant tone. You have broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer. I am only at the 5th Ling Qi layer. Of course the strength behind your punches would be stronger. However, you are an expert at using fire, but I am an expert at using swords. Lin Feng completely forgot about the attack of a moment before as if it didn't matter. He reached to his back and grabbed his long sword. At that moment, his energy became increasingly more powerful. That's right, Lin Feng is an expert at using swords. His cultivation level is weaker than that of Heimo. If he fights recklessly, it can get very dangerous for him. The crowd was getting impatient again. Even though they thought that Heimo was stronger, Lin Feng still couldn't be that weak. Otherwise, this battle would have been pointless to watch. Come here, said Heimo indifferently while looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng walked forwards again. Lin Feng's sword energy, which filled the atmosphere, suddenly enveloped Heimo's body. Heimo frowned suddenly, a pain invaded his body, and he was being cut by the intense sword energy which surrounded his body. Lin Feng wasn't rushing, he was slowly walking forwards. After each of his steps, his sword force was getting more intense and increasingly sharper. Humph. Heimo smiled coldly. He raised his fist and launched an extremely powerful punch towards Lin Feng. Deadly sword. Lin Feng's sword fluttered in the air. His sword pierced the atmosphere while emitting a whistling noise. The sword energy was concentrated on the tip of his sword and rushed straight towards Heimo. Extermination, shouted Heimo. A black chi emerged from his fist and started to consume the sword energy. At the same time, it collided with Lin Feng's sword. The fireball crashed into Lin Feng's sword and the black flames were extinguished. Lin Feng, expression didn't change. Lin Feng released an extremely cold chi from his body. When the black flames collided with his palm, it left him with a small injury. However, this time when using his sword, Lin Feng seemed unperturbed. Flame attack. Heimo launched his fist forward with a new attack. 2 black flames moved straight towards Lin Feng. Fatal sword. Lin Feng thrust his sword forward. His sword chi was even more intense and contained a deadly chi. Lin Feng's sword energy and the black flames were both tearing through the air as they collided. The deadly chi of Lin Feng's sword invaded the entire atmosphere, and it even made Heimo take a step backwards. Lin Feng's sword mastery made him look like a triumphant sword god. Lin Feng had gained the advantage with that attack. Heimo silently looked at Lin Feng for an instant and immediately said, "You definitely have the qualifications to fight against me. You are strong enough, but this is only the beginning." While talking, Heimo lifted his hand into the air. A burning black flame appeared and danced around his hand. That flame was emitting an incredibly deadly chi. Boom! Heimo quickly stretched out both of his hands and the flame burst into 9 small flames. They were all black and were filled with the same sinister deadly chi. Deadly Black Lotus. The crowd was stupefied. Heimo surprisingly wanted to use the Deadly Black Lotus. It seemed like he was taking this battle seriously. How skillful. "It's a good thing I am also done warming up," said Lin Feng while sounding indifferent. His eyes turned pitch black. His eyes were completely cold and expressionless. His mind started processing everything that was happening around him. At that moment, Lin Feng could even distinctly feel the deadly chi that was contained within the 9 black flames. Lin Feng's sword diffused a dark and deadly chi. It was the same chi as that of the Deadly Black Lotus. Even though the crowd was a distance from the fighting stage, they could still feel the deadly chi released by the 2 fighters. Their bodies felt fear, but the expression in the crowd's eyes revealed excitement. "I hope you don't disappoint me and at least put up a fight until you die. Otherwise, this battle would be uninteresting," said Heimo arrogantly. "Don't you think that you talk too much crap?" said Lin Feng coldly. Heimo kept calling in question Lin Feng's qualifications to fight against him, which gave the impression that he was monstrously strong. However, Lin Feng was actually forcing Heimo to become serious, even though he said otherwise. "Since you can't wait to die, I will help you achieve your aim," said Heimo coldly. He then shouted, "Black Flames, Lotus Transformation." When Heimo finished speaking, each of his flames transformed into a lotus flower which rushed Lin Feng at full speed. The deadly chi from the black flames had filled the entire atmosphere, surrounding Lin Feng's entire body. The entire atmosphere started to turn black. "How scary," thought the people watching when they saw the deadly lotus flowers. These lotus flowers looked like they had come straight from hell. Lin Feng was still calmly holding his sword in the same position. The dark chi within his sword was getting more and more intense. At the moment when the lotus flames arrived in front of him, Lin Feng finally released his sword strike. Lonely Sword. When Lin Feng attacked, the atmosphere filled with the chi of his lonely sword. The black lotus flames collided with Lin Feng's sword and upon impact they vanished. However, Lin Feng's sword continued to move towards Heimo. Heimo looked stupefied. Behind his body, an insanely violent black fire appeared. At the same time, an infinity of black lotus flames started orbiting around his body. His body was surrounded by black fire. The entire atmosphere was being burned by the fire. When Lin Feng's lonely sword was about to reach him, the multitude of black lotus flames turned into a gigantic lotus flower which rushed towards Lin Feng's sword and blocked his attack. "My lotus flower is not only an offensive attack, it can also be used for protection. It is impossible for you to break through it," said Heimo arrogantly while looking at Lin Feng, and then added, "I said it already. Today will be the day that you die." Lin Feng was staring at the huge black lotus, which looked like an illusion. His sword was stopped. Lin Feng was staring at the huge black lotus, which looked like an illusion. His sword was stopped, but Lin Feng still looked calm. His black eyes looked extremely cold. His mouth started moving and he began to speak. "Really? I can't break through?" He said these words in a cold, indifferent tone, and when he finished talking, the chi from his lonely sword became even more intense. It looked like it could annihilate anything that stood in its path, as if there was nothing else in the world but Lin Feng's sword. Sword of Nirvana was a very quick skill to perform. It was a high-level Xian skill. It made attacks much sharper and more lethal. It was better than some of the skills at the low D level. Lin Feng slightly closed his eyes. His sword emitted a whistling noise as the chi rushed through the air. There was no surge of sharp sword force, but suddenly Lin Feng's sword started unceasingly shaking. "Huh?" Heimo looked perplexed while looking at the sword upon his black lotus. Crack! A cracking noise spread through the atmosphere. On the gigantic black lotus, A small crack appeared which stupefied Hayamo. Break, said Lin Feng. The chi from his sword of nirvana attack became even thicker. In the blink of an eye, the black lotus started shattering into pieces. Lin Feng was pressing forward with indomitable will, and was moving straight for Hayamo, who was unable to block the attack. Hayamo's heart was pounding. His facial expression was hideous. He had been incredibly arrogant a moment before, but at that moment Hayamo seemed to be much weaker than Lin Feng. I cannot dodge that sword. Hayamo was looking at that majestic sword as it approached him. He knew that he would be unable to dodge the attack. He raised his hands and what seemed to be an infinite quantity of cold black flames emerged from his palms. The small lotus flames combined into a single lotus and moved towards Lin Feng. Boom! The sword and the black lotus collided. The white resplendence of the sword and the blackness of the black lotus were mixing together within the atmosphere. The deadly chi rolled on the ground of the fighting stage. The fighting stage was completely covered with a terrifying deadly chi. Hayamo and Lin Feng were still in their original locations, motionless. The crowd was astonished. Their hearts were pounding. Whose attack had been more powerful? Who was winning? Who was losing? Thur. A subtle sound spread in the air. Immediately after, the crowd saw that Hayamo's clothes were pierced and blood was flowing from his chest. They were in complete shock. As far as Lin Feng was concerned, his clothes were torn and a multitude of black marks had appeared on his body. Both sides had been injured from that attack. Hayamo is much stronger than Gongluan and the others, just as I expected, thought Lin Feng. A moment before, Hayamo knew that he could not avoid Lin Feng's lonely sword, so he didn't even try. He didn't panic either, which was a crucial battle skill. Instead, he attacked Lin Feng, so both sides had ended up being injured. Hayamo remained motionless and silent for a moment while staring at Lin Feng. He then looked at his chest. I admit that I underestimated you. You definitely qualify to fight against me, and I will have to use all of my strength to beat you. Hayamo was talking with a cold tone. The crowd was surprised. Hayamo, a moment ago, had shown extreme strength. How terrifying would it be if he fought with all his strength? A light flashed through Lin Feng's eyes. He looked at Hayamo and said coldly, "Can you stop talking crap, please? Since the beginning of the battle, you keep saying that I cannot compete with you. Where do these injuries on your body come from?" said Lin Feng coldly. He was disgusted by Hayamo's words. Lin Feng now had the qualifications to fight against him, and he had to use all his strength to beat him? That had been the case since the beginning of the battle. Hayamo was a disgusting and shameless person. You will understand what I mean, said Hayamo indifferently. He raised his head and a black fire emerged. A multitude of small black lotus flames surrounded his body and slowly started dancing through the air. Fusion, shouted Hayamo in a deep voice. These small black lotus flames started rushing into Hayamo's skin and muscles. Suddenly, black lines appeared all over his body. The crowd was astonished by what they were witnessing. At that moment, it was as if the crowd had understood why he had called himself Hayamo. He was named as a black evil spirit. A gigantic amount of deadly chi rushed from his body. The crowd could not believe their eyes. At that moment, Hayamo's entire body looked like it was just a huge deadly black fire. That chi was terrifying. The scariest thing was that Hayamo's chi seemed to be increasing. Boom! The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. Seventh Ling Chi layer. Surprisingly, that chi had the strength of the seventh Ling Chi layer. It was a terrifying chi. It seemed like Hayamo had been hiding his real strength. Swallowing these black flames gives him the strength of the seventh Ling Chi layer. How terrifying. Lin Feng will definitely die. The crowd was absolutely astonished. Being of the sixth Ling Chi layer was scary enough. They hadn't thought that Hayamo would be so strong. Could Lin Feng still resist him? Lin Feng was equally surprised. What kind of trick was that? Being able to absorb the black flames to increase one's cultivation level? Seventh Ling Chi layer, thought Lin Feng. Even though he knew that Hayamo was close to the seventh Ling Chi layer when they arranged the battle, his strength, now that he had reached the seventh Ling Chi layer, was actually terrifying. While looking at the fighting stage, Yu Cho smiled and said indifferently, Lin Feng will definitely die. Then, someone amongst the members of the Nye clan seemed moved and said, surprisingly, his father really helped him to reach a high cultivation level. Even if his second son is dead, He can still be proud. Nobody believed that Lin Feng had a chance to win anymore. They were all sure that Lin Feng was going to die. Mo looked at Lin Feng with despising eyes and slowly said, "You made me use my flame fusion skill, so you can be proud of yourself, but you are about to die." Lin Feng remained silent. He had an acute perception of everything that was happening around him, including Mo's powerful increase in qi. He was still holding his sword calmly. His body moved again and he thrust his sword forward. His sword looked simple and ordinary. Mo smiled. The black flames turned into a vortex and moved to block Lin Feng's sword. Such an ordinary sword strike should be easy to block, but at that moment Lin Feng's sword started to shake. Lin Feng's sword pierced through Mo's vortex and moved towards his chest. An incredibly huge amount of sharp deadly qi fell onto Mo's body. No! Mo's facial expression drastically changed. A monstrous qi emerged from his body. His hands were violently shaking. At that moment, an oppressive energy rushed towards Lin Feng's body. It looked like a black flame was dancing around Lin Feng. Vanishing shadow die. Lin Feng looked serene while saying these few words. Immediately, his body vanished like a shadow. Even when seeing it from so close it seemed like an illusion, but it felt extremely real. Lin Feng's sword continued moving forwards. The noise of Lin Feng's sword penetrating through Mo's flesh filled the air. His sword cut through Mo like a hot knife cutting through butter. Boom! The crowd was stunned. They couldn't believe their eyes. How was that possible? Really, how was that possible? At the moment when Mo temporarily enhanced his power to have the strength of the 7th Ling Qi layer, they all thought that Lin Feng was going to be exterminated by Mo's flames. They all thought that Mo would easily kill Lin Feng. But Lin Feng remained calm throughout the entire battle. He had taught the crowd a lesson to not be so quick to judge. His sword had pierced straight through Mo's chest. Wuxia was stupefied. Lin Feng had surprisingly killed Mo with his sword. Yan, the leader of the Nye clan, stood up. The smile that he had on his face a moment before had completely disappeared. He was shocked. How could it turn out like this? The only sound that came from Mo's mouth was something that sounded bestial. His long and messy hair was flowing in the wind. The black lines which covered his body were unceasingly moving while a surge of deadly qi emerged from him. "Die!" shouted Mo. His fist rushed towards Lin Feng and crashed onto his body. Lin Feng's sword slipped from his grip and his body was pushed backwards. That punch left a black mark on Lin Feng's chest. His clothes were completely burned where the punch had landed. Blood was flowing from the corner of Lin Feng's mouth. Mo was walking like a madman towards Lin Feng. When he arrived in front of Lin Feng, he punched him again and Lin Feng's body flew away. Blood filled the air. Die! Mo was in a frenzy. He was completely insane. Surprisingly, Lin Feng had injured him with his sword. If he had bent down an inch, Lin Feng's sword would have penetrated directly into his heart. That was an extraordinary humiliation for him. He was walking very fast. At that moment, Mo really looked like a demon. He wanted to brutally slaughter Lin Feng. But at that moment, an extremely cold and powerful force emerged. It was so freezing cold that it made Mo stop. The crowd was also stupefied. They looked behind Lin Feng. Not far from him there was a pure and holy silhouette. She was walking slowly towards Lin Feng. "It's her again." The crowd was astonished. It seemed like she was ready to attack. In the end, Lin Feng couldn't compete with Mo. But nobody would make fun of Lin Feng. Mo's strength was too incredible. Lin Feng had already achieved something great, and had nearly killed Mo. Lin Feng could be proud of himself. Everybody would remember that. But what stupefied the crowd is that Lin Feng, who was kneeling on the ground, raised his hand and said to the silhouette behind him, "Let me do it myself." Meng Qing looked at him with a strange expression. She wanted to shake her head. How was she supposed to watch Lin Feng die and not help him? At that moment Lin Feng stood up. He looked like a proud and lonely man. He was firm and tenacious. Men cherish a fight. "If I die today, I will die happy and proud," said Lin Feng calmly, which astonished the crowd. Cherish a fight? Lin Feng was fighting to win or die. He closed his eyes. His brain could analyze everything that was happening around him. It was as if everything was moving in slow motion. Celestial spirit. Lin Feng called out in his heart. Lin Feng could sense that his perception of the world surrounding him grew even more. At that moment, his body seemed to be moving at an incredible speed compared to the rest of the world. He was also looking at the celestial book. He hadn't released the book spirit, but for some reason, he could still clearly see it. He started reading the first page slowly. On the first page there was a sword in suspension. It was a divine deadly sword. That sword was in suspension inside the celestial book. It was a deadly black sword. That sword was in suspension inside the celestial book. It was a deadly black sword. Even though it was only a picture, when Lin Feng looked at that picture, his heart was racing. It gave a feeling of pride and serenity. That sword could annihilate everything and its energy was majestic. It seemed like nobody could stop that sword, as if that sword could annihilate all of creation. Lin Feng had never thought that a picture could make his heart pound like it had. It seemed like that sword had been created for the sole purpose of destruction. If I could control the energy of that sword illusion, I could destroy anything in my path. I would need to fuse with that sword. I would become the sword and the sword would become me, thought Lin Feng. His thoughts were actually correct. Even though he was using a sword and most people thought that he was a sword master, Lin Feng was aware of the fact that he was far from being a master. Only if Lin Feng could reach an extremely high level of mastery would he then consider himself as a real sword master. Lin Feng took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Lin Feng's thought was deeply profound. Everything was progressing within his mind. In the blink of an eye, he had understood a great deal of things. Lin Feng was closing his eyes. He was motionless. Other people thought that his injuries were too serious and that he was trying to recover. Everybody wanted to see how Lin Feng was going to cherish his fight against Mo. Nobody doubted Lin Feng's determination because at that moment, he was still releasing an incredible amount of sharp sword force. What surprised the crowd even more is that Lin Feng's force was becoming more and more powerful. Apart from his will to fight, Lin Feng was still releasing deadly qi. How tough, how persistent! The crowd was astonished. Even in such conditions, Lin Feng was still determined to fight. But at that moment on the viewing platform, Yu Qiu and the leader of the Nie clan were astonished as well. They were both frowning. How could Lin Feng be so strong and his strength seemed to be increasing? How could he reach such strength? Even his deadly qi was become stronger and stronger. He's controlling pure energy. The two of them suddenly thought of something. They were stupefied. Lin Feng was controlling energy. The second Prince Duan Wuya as well as Long Ding were fixedly staring at Lin Feng, and could sense that his strength was increasing. Everyone was looking at him while looking perplexed. Control, Lin Feng could control his energy. Yin Er will soon kill him, said the leader of the Nie clan at that moment, which everyone looked towards Lin Feng, and Mo was moving towards Lin Feng again. Boom! A terrifying energy emerged from Lin Feng's body. It seemed like an infinite energy mixed with deadly qi. It seemed like Lin Feng had fused with this energy. In the blink of an eye, Lin Feng released all the energy he had been controlling at the same time. Lin Feng was surrounded by a strong wind. Lin Feng's torn clothes were fluttering in the wind. He has become stronger. The crowd was calmly staring at Lin Feng. The qi that Lin Feng had just released was at the 6th Ling qi layer and not of the 5th any longer. Lin Feng, while controlling his energy, had broken through to the next Ling qi layer. Mo's facial expression also slightly changed at that moment. His steps grew even more insane. When he arrived in front of Lin Feng, he threw a punch towards Lin Feng, which was surrounded by black flames. At the same time, Lin Feng opened his eyes. A bright and resplendent light suddenly blinded Mo, which forced him to close his eyes. When his fist should have reached Lin Feng was already 10 meters away from him. When Mo saw Lin Feng, he became anxious. He wasn't filled with the same determination as a moment before. When Lin Feng was still at the 5th Ling qi layer, there was a huge difference, but Lin Feng had broken through to the 6th Ling qi layer. How terrifying was that? You have already lost, said Lin Feng indifferently while looking at Mo, which surprised him. You are no longer an opponent for me. You are not courageous and powerful anymore. A short time ago I still admired your strength, but now you are just acting like a sore loser. You are not qualified to fight against me anymore. said Lin Feng. His energy had reached a pinnacle and could oppress anything in his path. Heimo's heart was racing in his chest. He was staring at Lin Feng. He didn't reply. Actually, what Lin Feng had said made his heart start to beat faster. When Lin Feng had managed to injure him, Heimo's confidence and arrogance had been destroyed. "Yin Er, he's killing your motivation, don't let him fool you," shouted someone from the Nye clan on the viewing platform. Heimo was surprised. He looked at Lin Feng, who had a smile on the corner of his mouth. "Regardless of the fact of whether I am destroying your motivation or not, you cannot deny that your heart is racing and you do not doubt my words. That's enough." When Lin Feng finished talking, he started walking again. His sword energy and deadly qi were still growing stronger and stronger. "Sword," said Lin Feng. At that moment, a sword illusion appeared in his hand. It was in suspension and it was pitch black. That was the sword from the picture. Sword energy. The crowd was astonished. How was that possible? Lin Feng could also use sword energy. Only cultivators of the Xian Qi layer could use pure energy to attack. That was one of the tools of the Xian Qi layer to kill their enemies. Even though Lin Feng had broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer, how could he use energy? Wrong, that's not pure energy control. It's a skill, or in other words, he's controlling the sword energy with his own will. Some people on the viewing platform who were extremely strong understood what was happening. They were also stupefied. Even though it wasn't pure energy, it was still very scary. Relying on his own control rather than on his spirit, Lin Feng had surprisingly been able to make a sword illusion appear. His sword illusion was even releasing deadly qi. If someday, Lin Feng was able to use real pure energy, then his strength would become monstrously terrifying. Then he would become a truly majestic figure. Lin Feng was also aware of his weaknesses. Relying on control, he had been able to use the sword illusion which was in the celestial book, but as before, his strength and his control was not sufficient. A light flashed. Lin Feng unsheathed his soft sword which was around his waist. His soft sword and the sword illusion fused together. Lin Feng's sword energy and the deadly qi invaded the entire atmosphere. "Heimo, this will end with one sword strike," said Lin Feng. His body flickered and he transformed into a shadow. Vanishing shadow skill. From the viewing platform, people couldn't see clearly what was happening. They could only see a sword which was emitting a terrifying energy. Heimo was intensely staring at the sword. That sword wasn't as resplendent or as simple as the sword which had injured him a moment before, but he knew the strength of the attack was immense. The energy within as well as the deadly qi around it was much stronger. That sword was the result of the combination of the vanishing shadow skill and controlling sword energy. When Heimo looked at the sword, he had the impression that it was a normal sword. However, when it was about to reach him, it started to glow and moved straight towards his heart. "Black Lotus," shouted Heimo extremely loudly while using his spirit. A gigantic black lotus appeared in front of him and blocked the way. However, when Lin Feng's sword arrived in front of the black lotus, it pierced directly through it. That sword was destined for Heimo. "This doesn't look good. Yin Er is in danger," said the head of the Nye clan when he saw Lin Feng's sword. He stood up and instantly rushed towards the fighting stage. A brutal and oppressive qi fell onto Lin Feng's body. Considering his strength, he understood how terrifying Lin Feng's sword attack was. "I didn't get involved, you cannot get involved either." While the head of the Nye clan was getting involved, Meng Qing released some freezing ice force which moved straight towards the head of the Nye clan. His facial expression drastically changed. Yin Er was in danger. "Boy, stop." At that moment, while Lin Feng's sword was piercing through the black lotus, a loud voice resonated in his ears which made his heartbeat accelerate. Sound attack. Sound attack. Lin Feng's soul was shaking. Lin Feng was still holding his sword, but it seemed unable to move further. Besides, under the pressure of that potent sound attack, Lin Feng was unable to move his body for a brief moment. How could such a fusion of deadly energy be stopped so easily? Lin Feng's opponent Heimo could use a trick to gain the strength of the 7th qi layer. He was extremely powerful, but he could not stop that attack. Die. The black lines on Heimo's body started swirling in an insane way. His body released a terrifying deadly qi. Boom! Fluffy has exploded. The entire atmosphere vibrated. Lin Feng's sword penetrated into He Mo's body, but left only a faint trace of blood. Then Lin Feng's body was blown away by He Mo's brutal attack. The noise of Lin Feng's body falling onto the ground spread in the air. Blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth. A deathly stillness filled the atmosphere. Had Lin Feng lost that battle after all? Wasn't Lin Feng stronger than He Mo? Of course it wasn't the case. He was at least as strong as He Mo. Lin Feng's sword had nearly killed He Mo. If Yu Qiu hadn't shouted like that, He Mo would have already been dead. Just like Lin Feng had pointed out, He Mo had lost his courage and was hesitant. He wasn't as determined as before. All of these things meant that He Mo had already lost before the battle even began. He Mo was much weaker than Lin Feng. However, Yu Qiu got involved and had influenced that battle. What happened was unfair. But who would dare blame Yu Qiu? If somebody dared offend him and the Yu clan, even if it was the Celestial Academy, he would destroy them, and even worse if it was a mere student of the Celestial Academy. Lin Feng, who was on the ground, raised his head and looked at Yu Qiu, who was sat on the viewing platform. His eyes were filled with endless hatred. Truly shameless. Lin Feng was looking at Yu Qiu with endless killing intent. But he knew that he was nothing in comparison with Yu Qiu. If he dared to try and kill him, he would just bring about his own destruction. In that world, only those who were extremely strong were respected. Honor and integrity didn't count for anything. If someone was strong, then nobody would dare to contradict them. Meng Qing's body disappeared. She quickly moved next to Lin Feng and helped Lin Feng to stand up. Her beautiful face was filled with coldness. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm all right." Lin Feng wiped off the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked extremely proud. He was standing perfectly straight. What a proud young man, thought the crowd while looking at Lin Feng. Their hearts were filled with admiration for him. Lin Feng had surprised them throughout the whole battle. He Mo, one of the top 10 students of the Celestial Academy, had to use all his strength against Lin Feng, who was at the 5th Ling Qi layer. He even had to rely on the power of his Black Lotus to possess the strength of the 7th Ling Qi layer. Besides, at the moment when Meng Qing had wanted to help Lin Feng, he had refused and had said the outcome of the battle for him would be victory or death. Immediately, when the entire crowd thought that he had already lost the battle, Lin Feng had broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer. Then, he released an attack which should have killed He Mo. But Yu Qiu interrupted him. But thanks to his strength and determination, Lin Feng had gained everybody's esteem and admiration. Even in critical conditions, Lin Feng was still standing perfectly straight. He Mo was looking at Lin Feng. He looked perplexed. He didn't look arrogant and proud anymore. It was very clear to him that he had lost the battle. If Yu Qiu hadn't been there a moment ago, Lin Feng's sword would have pierced through his heart and killed him. But Lin Feng wasn't looking at him. Instead, he was staring at Yu Qiu as if He Mo wasn't there anymore. He Mo felt ridiculous. The atmosphere was filled with deathly silence. It was very oppressive for everybody. Everybody felt uncomfortable. At that moment, a faint laughter broke the silence. The second prince, while looking at the fighting stage, said, "You are both extremely strong no matter who. You are both students of the academy. If one of you died, it would be a great loss for the Celestial Academy and even for our country. Let's put an end to the battle now." Duan Wuya wanted to put an end to the battle, but hadn't blamed Yu Qiu for having intervened. It seemed that, no matter what the situation was, it was impossible to guess what the second prince really thought. Long Ding looked at Duan Wuya as if he was surprised. He then immediately looked at the Yu clan and the Nye clan. As if the situation had suddenly become clear, he nodded and said, "All right, that's the end of the battle." The Nye clan didn't say anything. It wasn't such a bad idea to stop at that point. After all, He Mo's victory wouldn't have been very honorable after all. If he had killed Lin Feng, people would have despised He Mo for his behavior. How could a battle to death finish before the end result? The disciples of the Celestial Academy usually aren't such cowards, said Yu Qiu indifferently while smiling at Long Ding. The crowd was stupefied. He wanted Lin Feng to die. Besides, he had said on purpose that the disciples of the Celestial Academy weren't cowards. He wanted to make Long Ding angry. What an evil man. Lin Feng had offended him, so Yu Qiu was going to do anything to try and create difficulties for Lin Feng. He wanted Lin Feng to die and didn't care about making His Highness the Crown Prince lose face because of it. Yu Qiu was a member of the Yu clan. He was obviously arrogant. Long Ding was staring at Yu Qiu. He wanted to say something but didn't open his mouth. He only heard the sound of a cold and detached voice. Of course. The people of the Celestial Academy are not cowards, unlike the members of the Yu clan. The person who had said these words was obviously Lin Feng. He fixedly stared at Yu Qiu. He sounded cold and indifferent, which gave everyone the impression that he was insane. He surprisingly still dared to insult Yu Qiu. Could it be that he really wanted to die? They didn't think about the fact that Yu Qiu already wanted Lin Feng's life. Even if Lin Feng provoked and offended him again, it didn't matter much anymore. Even dead people dare to say such crazy things. Yu Qiu's pupils slightly shrank, revealing murderous intentions. He looked at Lin Feng and said, "When did my clan, the Yu clan, ever contain cowards? What gives you the right to talk this way?" "I don't have the right to talk that way?" Lin Feng smiled coldly, walked forwards and said, "I want to ask you though, how strong is the Yu clan? And its young members, how strong are they? The Yu clan frightens everyone in the Imperial City. It can easily annihilate the Celestial Academy. And you ask me how strong we are?" Sneered Yu Qiu before adding, "Besides, concerning the young generation, they are of course all giants amongst men. They are extremely strong." "Giants amongst men? You're really shameless. I didn't know a bunch of scum could be considered as giants amongst men." While talking, Lin Feng was smiling coldly. Yu Qiu was even more furious. Lin Feng ignored his facial expression and pointed at the two young men standing to his sides. He then said, "These two, they are older than me. I challenge them both to a battle to death. If the young disciples of the Yu clan are giants amongst men, then they will fight." The two young men on Yu Qiu's sides were stupefied. They were staring fixedly at Lin Feng. He surprisingly dared uninterruptedly provoke them. These two young men were not as strong as Lin Feng. They had seen how Lin Feng had almost killed Heimo. How could they accept that challenge? Yu Qiu hadn't thought that Lin Feng would make such a move either. A light flashed through his eyes, showing his uncertainty. Immediately after, he smiled and said, "You cannot challenge Yu clan members as you wish. Coward." Yu Qiu hadn't even finished talking that Lin Feng interrupted him and said coldly, "If you don't dare, then you don't dare. There is no need to try and think about a way out or give excuses. You say that they are giants amongst men, but they are just scum, nothing more. Last time I violently beat one of them at the prisoner arena. I don't know if he's still feeling a little weak from then. I also humiliated the other one. They are just trash. They are so scared that they cannot get their revenge alone. They had to go and find a senior to protect them. That kind of giant amongst men is just ridiculous to the extreme." The crowd was a bit surprised by Lin Feng's words. So that's what had started all of this. Originally, Lin Feng had humiliated the arrogant young people from the Yu clan. No wonder Yu Qiu disliked Lin Feng so much. Lin Feng continued to talk. "But when I see you, it makes me think that the juniors and the seniors of the Yu clan are probably all the same. Therefore, I am not that surprised by your cowardliness and your shamelessness. And you still dare think that you are better than everyone else. In fact, I would like to ask you a question. Are all the members of the Yu clan so shameless?" Lin Feng's words stupefied the people in the crowd. Yu Qiu was staring at Lin Feng as the killing intent on his face grew stronger. Such a shameless and impudent clan, launching surprise attacks on other people and not even admitting it. And besides, you are so satisfied and proud of yourself. Surprisingly, you dare sit on the viewing platform for people of high status. What a nerve! As if Lin Feng didn't understand how furious Yu Qiu was, Lin Feng continued talking. Yu Qiu was evilly looking at Lin Feng. He was burning with anger and his face was bright red. He was smiling, but killing intent was obvious. Yu Qiu was evilly looking at Lin Feng. He was burning with anger and his face was bright red. He was smiling, but killing intent was obvious. "Shameless? Today, no matter what you say, I will kill you. The only reason is because I am stronger than you and my Yu clan is unstoppable." Yu Qiu's voice couldn't sound more arrogant and aggressive than it did at this point. His reason was enough to kill Lin Feng. He was stronger than him and his clan was extremely strong as well. Without listening to anybody else's opinion, he could kill Lin Feng as he wished. Why are you not coming then? Why are you still standing up there? Lin Feng was looking at Yu Qiu, and his voice sounded indifferent. The crowd was once again stupefied. What? Could it be that he really wanted to die? Yu Qiu narrowed his eyes while looking at Lin Feng, and his face crumpled in anger. He looked like he had become completely furious. Yu Qiu had clearly expressed his wish of killing Lin Feng. He wanted to make Lin Feng's blood flow to prove to everyone that his clan, the Yu clan, was too powerful to be insulted. You want to die, and so I will help you achieve your aim. When Yu Qiu finished talking, Lin Feng started freezing from the cold energy that had started to surround his body. Under the pressure of that energy, he felt like he was frail and brittle, and Yu Qiu seemed to be thinking about killing Lin Feng right there. Die. Crack. Two sounds spread through the air at the same time. The first one had obviously come from Yu Qiu, who wanted to kill Lin Feng. However, Yu Qiu had an attack because that second sound had come from the second prince, Duan Wuya, who was next to him. Duan Wuya's seat made of stone was broken into pieces. Duan Wuya was standing up. He didn't look soft and gentle anymore. He looked fierce and heroic. Mr. Yu, what happened today is the business of Celestial Academy. Now stop with this foolishness. How does that sound? Said Duan Wuya while looking at Yu Qiu. He sounded indifferent and calm, but his voice was filled with determination. Yu Qiu had come to make the Yu clan gain prestige. Could he back down so easily? He was Yu Qiu after all. He wanted to prove to everyone that the Yu clan was unstoppable. He wanted all these unimportant people to understand clearly how powerful the Yu clan was. Your Highness, you heard that boy. He humiliated my Yu clan. How could I, Yu Qiu, let him off? If I let him off, my clan would endlessly lose face. Yu Qiu was looking at Duan Wuya and sounded neither servile nor overbearing. The crowd was stupefied. What was going on? The situation was very strange. It seemed like there was now tension between Yu Qiu and the second prince. First, Yu Qiu wanted to kill Lin Feng, and then the second prince was preventing him from doing so. When everybody thought that Yu Qiu wouldn't make the second prince lose face, he insisted that he wanted to kill Lin Feng. The crowd was puzzled by Yu Qiu's actions. At that moment, Lin Feng looked at Yu Qiu and the second prince arguing. He took a deep breath and tried to relax. Since Yu Qiu had arrived, he had been trying to prove to everyone how powerful he was, to the extent that he had even contradicted and argued with Long Ding, the vice principal of the Celestial Academy. Even though Lin Feng hadn't been there at the start after he arrived, Yu Qiu was still humiliating the Celestial Academy to the extent that he had even threatened to destroy it. There seemed to be nothing taboo for Yu Qiu. He felt like he could act any way he chose and say whatever he wanted. He had even dared to interrupt Lin Feng and Heimo's battle. It seemed like he was constantly trying to prove how powerful the Yu clan was. The rules did not matter to him. Why was Yu Qiu acting that way? By making a display of his strength and not letting Lin Feng off, he would prove to everyone that the Yu clan was the most prestigious and majestic of all the clans and sections. Even Long Ding remained silent when Yu Qiu threatened to annihilate the Celestial Academy, as if he couldn't bear the responsibility of getting involved. Everybody could see that the Long Ding and Duan Wuya's friendship was quite solid. However, even though the second prince and Yu Qiu's relationship seemed to be of a polite nature, it was still difficult to understand their mysterious relationship. Lin Feng had already met Duan Wuya. Duan Wuya had acted as the referee for one of his battles. The result had been that one of the Yu clan members, who was a student at the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu, had been humiliated and had lost his demonic fire lion. Lin Feng had guessed that Duan Wuya and the Yu clan didn't maintain good relations. It seemed very clear at this moment that there was not a good relationship between them. Duan Wuya wanted to protect Lin Feng, but Yu Qiu really wanted to kill Lin Feng, to the extent that he didn't even care about making Duan Wuya lose face. Lin Feng didn't know exactly what Yu Qiu's main motive was though. But Lin Feng had an even more audacious thought. He thought that the second prince, Duan Wuya, was actually the person at the origin of the Celestial Academy. He was the principal who never showed up. Everybody knew that an institute such as the Celestial Academy could only be established by a powerful person, and it probably even belonged to the Imperial clan. Besides, on that day, Duan Wuya had appeared at a critical moment for the academy. which made Lin Feng have the audacious thought that Duan Wuya was maybe the person who established the Celestial Academy. Yu Qiu certainly knew about it, but still didn't care about threatening to destroy the Celestial Academy in front of Duan Wuya. Lin Feng had been gambling since the beginning on the fact that Duan Wuya had connections with the Celestial Academy. Lin Feng was putting pressure on Yu Qiu, who wanted to kill him, but he was also putting pressure on Duan Wuya to act. He wanted to see if Duan Wuya was going to watch him die. He was gambling with his life at stake. He was betting on the fact that Duan Wuya and Yu Qiu's relationship would worsen because of him, and that they would not be able to maintain appearances. If Lin Feng guessed right, Duan Wuya was actually the creator and principal of the Celestial Academy. If Yu Qiu killed Lin Feng, his goal to make the Yu clan prestigious would be accomplished. Lin Feng's conjectures were right so far as Duan Wuya was now confronting Yu Qiu. If he had really understood Duan Wuya's background, then the latter wouldn't watch Lin Feng get killed. In fact, Duan Wuya was already getting involved. He had smashed his stone chair, but Yu Qiu kept insisting. When Duan Wuya heard Yu Qiu's words, he looked expressionless. Immediately after, he stopped talking, slowly turned around and moved down the stairs of the viewing platform. He then left, and while leaving, he said a proud and majestic sentence. Yu Qiu, try and kill him, then see what happens. Try and kill him, then see what happens. That was a very simple sentence with a clear meaning. When Duan Wuya had finished talking, he was already leaving. The most frightening was that he had left right after he finished speaking. Yu Qiu could try and kill Lin Feng, but what would happen to him? What a strong method, thought Lin Feng. Lin Feng was looking at Duan Wuya's silhouette as it vanished. He was very mysterious. All the problems were in Yu Qiu's hands. He also had the choice. At that moment, Yu Qiu's facial expression was rigid. If Duan Wuya had still been there, he could have justified himself, but now that Duan Wuya had left, he could not argue his side anymore. He could only choose whether he wanted to kill Lin Feng or not. After traveling for a short time, Duan Wuya arrived at a private mansion of his which was situated within the territory of the Celestial Academy. A silhouette suddenly appeared behind him. It was a black silhouette. Lin Feng had already seen that man in black clothes when he first arrived in the external part of the imperial city at Qing Xian's restaurant. "Nanshan, what do you think?" asked Duan Wuya, who sounded completely calm. "Your Highness, Yu Qiu's move was a 3-in-1. He would gain prestige, damage the reputation of the Celestial Academy, and make the Nye clan's opinion of you worsen," replied Nanshan calmly and indifferently. He was obviously talking about the opinion of the Nye clan after Duan Wuya acted as the referee. The Nye clan's esteem for Yu Qiu had probably increased. Besides, it had made the Nye clan and Duan Wuya's relations worsen as well. That was an extremely powerful method. "I know. I need your opinion. What do you think of Lin Feng?" said Duan Wuya indifferently. Nanshan was surprised. The expression of uncertainty flashed in his eyes. "He's an unparalleled genius," replied Nanshan, sounding indifferent. He was lost in thought for a brief moment. After a while, his mouth moved again and he said, "If today he confronted Yu Qiu because he was furious, that's all right. But if he did everything after understanding your status, that's truly terrifying. Of course it's the second reason. If he had done it out of anger, I would be really disappointed." Duan Wuya said, "Are you sure about what happened on that day?" "Yes, I am sure that it was the girl who was next to Lin Feng," nodded Nanshan. "A cultivator of the Xianqi layer. What a pity that we cannot let anyone follow Lin Feng any longer." When Duan Wuya finished talking, he started walking quickly and his silhouette vanished. Nanshan was still motionless. He was calmly looking at Duan Wuya's silhouette as he was leaving. Immediately after, his voice filled the air once again. Nanshan was still motionless. He was calmly looking at Duan Wuya's silhouette as he was leaving. Immediately after, his voice filled the air once again. "Besides, it is impossible to hide Lin Feng's status now. Let's arrange things so that the news spreads quickly. They will find out sooner or later. Besides, Lin Feng has already offended people with high status. Make sure that everybody knows his social status. Tell everyone that he is one of my people." Nanshan nodded while looking indifferently. His heart was filled with admiration as he sighed. In the imperial clan, the two princes were completely different. It wasn't a joyful thing for their clan but a great misfortune. The crown prince Duan Wu Dao was extremely aggressive and his strength was terrifying. He killed anyone who opposed him. He only said things once and never twice. He was ranked as the strongest of all the 8 high officials. There was nobody who wasn't scared of him. The second prince, Duan Wuya, was very ambitious and talented. He was smart and extremely strong. He was also definitely a genius. Even though he was a few years younger than the crown prince, he was also one of the 8 high officials. While Duan Wuya and Nanshan were talking, neither of them wondered whether Yu Qiu would kill Lin Feng or not. They were already certain that Yu Qiu wouldn't dare kill Lin Feng, as if it was impossible for him to take action. Actually, things were happening just like Duan Wuya had anticipated. Yu Qiu was evilly and coldly staring at Lin Feng, but he wasn't attacking him. He just turned and left abruptly. When the crowd saw Yu Qiu leave, they took a deep breath while feeling relieved. They had surprisingly felt scared for Lin Feng and the Celestial Academy. The 2 young men who had been on Yu Qiu's sides were coldly looking at Lin Feng. Immediately after, they left as well. Not only had Lin Feng already humiliated them but on that day, but he had also announced their humiliation in front of the entire crowd. They would never forgive him. Anyone who dared offend the Yu clan would never have a fitting end. Lin Feng was calmly looking at Yu Qiu and the other 2 as they were leaving. His eyes revealed his killing intent towards them. What had started on that day hadn't come to an end yet. Lin Feng also understood that the Yu clan wasn't going to let him off. If at that moment Duan Wuya hadn't helped Lin Feng, Yu Qiu wouldn't have let him live. If the Yu clan had an opportunity to kill him, they would have certainly killed him. Besides, there was something else that Lin Feng didn't understand. Why did the second prince want to help him? Even though Duan Wuya and Yu Qiu's relations were hostile, Lin Feng didn't understand what the real causes were. He also didn't understand why Duan Wuya continued to help him. Lin Feng was absolutely aware of the fact that Duan Wuya was going out of his way to help Lin Feng. After the Yu clan left, everybody else started leaving. But the Nie clan and the people of the Celestial Academy hadn't left. Long Ding looked at the fighting stage. Heimo and Lin Feng were still standing on the stage. He then said, "Nie Yan Lin Feng, the battle is over for today. Counts as a draw. You can leave now." "Little Yan, let's go," said a Nie clan member to Heimo. Even though Lin Feng had been injured, he was way too terrifying. His attacks were all lethal and a single strike could kill. He didn't want Heimo to keep fighting against Lin Feng. Lin Feng was too dangerous. He had nearly killed Heimo. Heimo intensely looked at Lin Feng. He looked perplexed. Immediately after, he slightly nodded, turned around and left. Lin Feng looked at Heimo's back. That battle was over, but everybody clearly understood that Lin Feng was the winner. Of course, in Lin Feng's eyes, defeat or victory wasn't the most important thing. He had proved to everyone that he was not someone who could be dealt with easily. Besides, Lin Feng didn't feel hatred for Heimo. After what had happened today with the Yu clan, the conflict existing between Lin Feng and Heimo seemed insignificant. The crowd was looking at Lin Feng. They all had various opinions about him, but on that day, Lin Feng's strength and natural talent had caused everyone's hearts to race. In the middle of the crowd, Lin Qian was staring at Lin Feng. The expression in her eyes revealed uncertainty. He was way too strong. In the past, Lin Feng had been expelled from the Lin clan and considered as trash. At that moment, Lin Qian felt incredibly inferior, and felt like she would never be able to catch up with his shadow. She also had good natural talent, but in front of Lin Feng, she was nothing. Lin Feng's cultivation speed was simply monstrous and his battle power was terrifying. Since Lin Feng had left Yangzhou City, he had already broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer, and even a cultivator with the strength of the 7th Ling Qi layer like Heimo was unable to compete with him. A year before, Lin Feng was only at the 5th Qi layer and was considered as trash. Nobody respected him even though he was the son of the former head of the Lin clan, Lin Hai. But at that moment, when she realized how powerful Lin Feng was, Lin Qian couldn't believe it. If the Lin clan learnt about how strong Lin Feng had become, they would probably regret that they sacrificed him for Lin Qian. When she thought about how the Lin clan would react, Lin Qian was feeling anxious. The Lin clan couldn't learn about him. Otherwise they wouldn't pay attention to her anymore, and no one would admire her. Everybody would only think about the trash that had been expelled from the clan and not her. Don't worry, when we have the opportunity, I will help you kill him, said Chu Zhanpeng, who was next to Lin Qian. He had noticed that Lin Qian's facial expression had changed. Even though Lin Feng was extremely strong, in front of him he was just trash. It was very easy for him to kill Lin Feng. The status of high official was a symbol of natural talent and extreme strength. It wasn't just a rumor, otherwise there wouldn't have been so many people eager to join the ranks. Because of the status of high official, many geniuses had died attempting to gain entry. Lin Qian raised her head and looked at Chu Zhanpeng. Immediately after, she smiled and nodded. Indeed, even though Lin Feng was extremely powerful, what could he do against Chu Zhanpeng, the high official? Chu Zhanpeng looked at Lin Qian, who was smiling, slowly turned around, looked at the fighting stage and then loudly said, I have heard that there are many geniuses in the Celestial Academy, and that Lin Feng was one of them. I, as untalented as I am, would like to know if there is a student of the Academy that would accept a battle against me, so we can both benefit. When Chu Zhanpeng finished talking, the students of the Celestial Academy were surprised. Chu Zhanpeng, one of the 8 high officials, suddenly wanted to challenge the students of the Celestial Academy. The other students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu were excited. If Chu Zhanpeng challenged them, who would accept? Chu Zhanpeng was a high official and there were only 8 of them in the entire Shuiyu country, but the Celestial Academy didn't have a single high official. I've already said it before, the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu is extremely powerful. It stole all the geniuses of the biggest sects and brought them to a single institution. Since the Celestial Academy was created, we have only relied on our own strength to slowly grow stronger. How could we compete with the Holy Courtyard? Said Longding indifferently, but his words were poignant. The students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu hadn't been trained by the Holy Courtyard itself. They were just gathered for their strength after being trained elsewhere. Of course, Chu Zhanpeng understood what Longding meant. He just smiled, looked at Lin Feng and said, It seems that there are some people who don't agree with Longding's opinion. At the prisoner arena, Lin Feng humiliated the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu and said it was shameless and only fought rigged battles. I want to show him that he was wrong. Lin Feng raised his head, looked at Chu Zhanpeng and Lin Qian. Inside he was smiling coldly. The high official of the Haoyu sect rushed over to the Holy Courtyard to become a dog and still is in a hurry to show off his strength, said Lin Feng mockingly and continued. Chu Zhanpeng, are all of the people of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu like you? Are they all so shameless? A teacher from the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu was smiling and staring at Lin Feng. They said, You don't dare to fight, why are you talking nonsense now? It was really shameless to give such a name to the Holy Courtyard. Let's try again though, since the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu is so powerful, why don't you battle against Vice Principal Long? Said Lin Feng while smiling. That teacher was surprised. Immediately after they said, Vice Principal Long is much older than me. What would be the point of fighting against him? If you don't dare fight, why are you talking nonsense? Said Lin Feng using the teacher's own arguments against him. He then said coldly, The students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu are really shameless and its teachers are the same. You refuse to fight against Vice Principal Long saying that he is older than you. Well, I want to ask you, isn't Chu Zhanpeng older than me as well? When proposing that battle, hadn't you thought about that? When the people of the Celestial Academy heard Lin Feng, they all smiled. The people of the Holy Courtyard were really shameless. Chu Zhanpeng was indeed a genius and one of the 8 high officials, but after all, he was already more than 20 years old. If Lin Feng was already 20, wouldn't he have reached a similar strength level already? Making him fight against Chu Zhanpeng now was just unfair. The teacher for the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu was a bit surprised. They then said, The Celestial Academy can choose any student as you wish, one who is of the same age as Chu Zhanpeng. The Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu also has the choice to choose 3 of your disciples. Choose 3 disciples who are the same age as me. All 3 of them can fight against me at the same time. The teacher for the Holy Courtyard had just finished talking when Lin Feng hastily replied. Everyone was stupefied and speechless. If you don't dare fight, get lost. We don't want such shameless and arrogant people here who think that they are extremely powerful, but actually just constantly lose face with their performances, said Lin Feng very impolitely and coldly. He then continued, If I have the occasion, I will have to pay a visit to the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu personally. If I have the occasion, I will have to pay a visit to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu personally. If I have the occasion, I will have to pay a visit to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu personally. When the crowd heard Lin Feng say these words while sounding calm, they were a bit surprised. If he wanted to go to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, he had to be extremely strong. He had to have at least surpassed Lo Shui and Chu Zhanpeng's strength, otherwise, he would just end up making a fool of himself. Nobody had doubts concerning Lin Feng's determination. Even though they had never talked to him personally, that battle had been enough for them to understand Lin Feng's personality. He was extremely determined, frivolous and unrestrained. Besides, he wasn't arrogant and was unyielding when it came to his beliefs. Even in dangerous situations, he didn't hesitate or retreat. Nobody thought that Lin Feng didn't mean those words. Lin Feng also had the heart of a very powerful cultivator. He was firm and persistent. Sooner or later, he would end up surpassing Chu Zhanpeng. Each and every single person of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was staring at Lin Feng with an ugly expression on their faces. That time he wasn't just making fun of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu in front of a few disciples, but in front of a great number of disciples. The holy courtyard of Shuiyu was being humiliated. How cruel, incomparably cruel. Murderous lights flashed through the eyes of the teacher from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. A murderous aura was being released from his body. A cracking sound spread through the air as his qi started to pour from his body. The stone chair on which he was sitting was broken into pieces. At that moment he was standing up. "The holy courtyard of Shuiyu will be happily awaiting you," said the teacher extremely coldly, and then his silhouette flickered and he left. The other people of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu glanced at Lin Feng and then also started leaving. After a while, a subtle sound spread in Long Ding's ears. The chair on which that person was sitting, which had been broken into pieces, was still crumbling. The stone was slowly turning into powder. That stone chair had surprisingly been broken using pure energy. Very quickly, only the people from the Celestial Academy were left in the public square. Long Ding was staring at Lin Feng with a profound gaze. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng would be so amazing during that battle. It was really unexpected. But it was clear to Long Ding that Heimo might not come back to the Celestial Academy after this battle. The crowd looked at Lin Feng. On that day, one of the top 10 cultivators of the Celestial Academy had been a stepping stone for Lin Feng to become famous. After that day, Lin Feng's reputation in the Celestial Academy would continue to grow. "Alright, let's stop everything for today. You can all disperse," said Long Ding while standing up. He glanced at everyone leaving and finally glanced at Lin Feng. He said, "Lin Feng, you should also go back and have a good rest. You should also take care of your injuries." Lin Feng slightly nodded and started walking. Meng Qing was still following behind him. Lin Feng took 2 steps forwards and then a group of people moved in front of him. It was Lu Fei, Jing Yuan, Duan Feng and the others. Today was the day of Lin Feng's battle against Heimo. They were not going to miss it. "Are you alright?" asked Lu Fei while staring at Lin Feng. She looked incredibly concerned about him. That guy was really insane. He didn't know when to stop no matter who was in front of him, and even no matter how many people, he would never give up. A moment before, Lu Fei and the others had been quite scared. But they were not as strong as Lin Feng. They couldn't do anything. They could only watch as the events unfurled. Lin Feng smiled at Lu Fei. Lu Fei was surprised, but immediately after she felt relieved. However, she was still staring fixedly at Lin Feng. What was that guy thinking? He wasn't even concerned about his injuries. He hasn't died, so why would I? Lin Feng was scratching his head. Heimo's injuries were also serious. A moment ago, Lin Feng's sword had pierced through his chest, but just missed his heart. Lin Feng's organs and circulatory system hadn't been damaged much either. "The people of the Yu clan are really shameless," said Yuan Shan while looking furious. "They are more than just shameless," said Duan Feng while furious, and then said, "If the second prince hadn't been there, the scariest thing is that they would have attacked Lin Feng." Everybody slightly nodded. On that day, if the second prince hadn't been there, it would have been very dangerous. "Let's go. I already seized the 8 rooms on the 4th floor in the cultivation tower. If you need to practice, you can use them," said Lin Feng to his friends, which surprised everybody. They then all smiled wryly. With Lin Feng's strength, It was indeed not difficult to seize the entire fourth floor of the cultivation tower. On the fourth floor of the cultivation tower, all of them entered into cultivation rooms. Lin Feng brought Meng Qing towards a room as well, inserted some purity stones and said, "Meng Qing, you should cultivate for a while too. I'll be in the room opposite yours." "All right," said Meng Qing while slightly nodding. Her gorgeous silhouette was walking towards the inside of the room, but she quickly turned around and she said while looking at Lin Feng, "Actually, even if the second prince hadn't been there today, you still would not have died. You don't owe him much." While talking, the door of her cultivation room slowly closed itself, leaving Lin Feng outside, alone and stunned. Lin Feng was astonished. He then shook his head and frowned. He was wondering how strong Meng Qing was. He had no idea. The only thing he knew was that last time, the Bai clan member, the man in blue clothes who was of the Xianqi layer, had been scared away by Meng Qing and had left. Lin Feng didn't know if she had already fought against other cultivators of the Xianqi layer. The second prince, Duan Wuya. Lin Feng was lowly talking to himself. That friendly and mysterious prince was unfathomable. At that moment he was sure that Duan Wuya, the second prince, was at the creator of the Celestial Academy. It meant that Long Ding, the vice principal, had to listen to him. Did Lin Feng becoming a student of the Celestial Academy have anything to do with Duan Wuya? If that was indeed due to Duan Wuya, why would he have done that? Why was he so interested in Lin Feng? Talent potential? When he had just arrived in the Imperial City and had just arrived outside in front of the Celestial Academy, nobody knew who he was. Who knew that he had potential and high natural talent? Even if they knew that he was a genius, why would one of the 8 high officials like Duan Wuya be interested in him? Being a matter of gaining influence was even less possible. Lin Feng didn't come from an influential family. He descended from the Lin clan of Yangzhou City and had even been expelled. His sect had even been destroyed by Duan Tianlang. Lin Feng frowned. He didn't understand anything about it, so it was useless to keep thinking too much about it. He then inserted some purity stones into one of the cultivation rooms and entered. The door closed itself. Lin Feng sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. He then immediately released his celestial spirit. In the blink of an eye, the world became a world of darkness. As if Lin Feng had been completely cut off from the outside world. He entered into his own world created from darkness. At that moment, Lin Feng didn't just release the first layer of his celestial spirit, he also completely released the second layer. In Lin Feng's mind, a magnificent and resplendent light appeared. Colorful spirals spanned into various shapes inside his mind. Then his celestial book appeared. At that moment, his celestial book had already opened to the second page as if it had been that way since ancient times. Lin Feng was looking at that book, or more precisely, he looked above it. There was now a sword calmly floating in the air above the book. That sword was black. It was the deadly sword of a warlord born from battle. At that moment, Lin Feng could clearly sense the energy released by that sword. It was sharp and deadly. It seemed like it could destroy an entire planet without flinching. That sword, using its own energy and its own life, was able to fuse with Lin Feng. In the blink of an eye, a month passed. Lin Feng's eyes were still closed and he was still motionless. His conscience was focused on the sword that was floating above the book. In the small and narrow cultivation room, a sharp sword qi emerged and mixed with deadly qi. Then there was a thick and dense battle energy. That sword qi had not been released by Lin Feng's celestial book. It had obviously been released by Lin Feng's body. His sword qi was much stronger than in the past. Inside his sword qi, which was mixed with deadly qi, was also battle energy. Nobody could look down on that battle energy. Grabbing the black sword, which was longing to rise into the heavens, to dominate both heaven and earth. It had already been 2 months since the battle between Lin Feng and Mo. The students were also talking about it less and less. The Celestial Academy was once again returning to a peaceful state. It had already been 2 months since the battle between Lin Feng and Mo. The students were also talking about it less and less. The Celestial Academy was once again returning to a peaceful state. Lin Feng and his friends were in their respective cultivation rooms, making great efforts to increase their cultivation level. Nothing important was happening. At that moment, A silhouette was coming from the cultivation tower. That person was wearing ragged robes with a great deal of holes. Their robes had become completely tattered. But when the crowd saw the person, they only showed looks of admiration rather than disdain. That person was Lin Feng. When Lin Feng looked up at the sky, he saw that it was already evening. There were rosy clouds floating on the horizon. The scenery was splendid, but in the world of cultivation, very few people took the time to appreciate such beauty. The only thing that mattered was strength. The powerful people possessed everything. Those who were weak would only be endlessly bullied. Lin Feng was walking and wanted to go to his apartment, but at that moment, a silhouette flickered and appeared in front of him. When Lin Feng saw that person, his facial expression became slightly rigid, revealing his surprise. Lin Feng had already seen that person before. When he was in the external part of the imperial city, he had seen them at Qing Xian's restaurant. He had also seen that the person had an intimate relation with the owner of that restaurant, Qing Xian. That was the man in black clothes. Lin Feng hadn't expected to meet him, especially at the academy. "Young Master Lin, my name is Nan Shan." Contrary to all expectations, that man introduced himself first to Lin Feng in a very polite way while smiling and nodding. "Nan Shan," repeated Lin Feng in a low voice. He looked at him and said, "Is there something you want from me?" "Yes," said Nan Shan while nodding. He didn't have the same cold expression as when he had met Lin Feng for the first time. Instead, he was smiling and said, "I was worried that young Master Lin Feng wouldn't come out of the cultivation tower for a much longer time. Fortunately, I managed to meet you today." Lin Feng's stupefaction became even more intense. Meet him? Surprisingly, that person was really looking for him specifically. "Young Master Lin, the young master of my clan would like to invite you to a banquet. I was sent here to find you for that express purpose. I hope that you will be able to honor his invitation and follow me," said Nan Shan extremely politely. Lin Feng was astonished. "A banquet? Who is the young master of yours? Why do they want me to participate in that banquet?" asked Lin Feng, surprised. The last time that he had met Nan Shan, they had almost fought. The fact that Nan Shan had come to invite him to participate in a banquet seemed strange to Lin Feng. "You know the young master of my clan. You saw him 2 months ago during your battle. He personally came to see it and was sitting on the viewing platform," replied Nan Shan. Lin Feng was stupefied. "Is it the second prince?" "Indeed. My master is precisely His Highness Duan Wuya." Nan Shan was slightly nodding. When Lin Feng heard his response, he looked at Nan Shan. Nan Shan was one of the second prince's people. Therefore, the second prince probably knew about Lin Feng because of the time when he met Nan Shan at Qing Xian's restaurant. Could it be Meng Qing? Lin Feng had an idea. Lin Feng's show of strength on that day had been good but hadn't been enough to draw the attention of someone as important as the second prince. However, on that day, Meng Qing had destroyed the restaurant, which shocked everybody. But if the second prince was interested in Meng Qing, why was he inviting Lin Feng to come to the banquet? The probability that he was interested in Meng Qing was very small. "Why invite me?" asked Lin Feng. "His Highness said that once you are there, you will understand," replied Nan Shan. Lin Feng seemed uncertain. He remained silent for a few seconds and then said, "Do we have to leave right now?" Nan Shan looked at the sky and said, "The banquet should be starting soon. If this is not inconvenient for you, we should go now." "All right," replied Lin Feng while nodding after hesitating for a moment. He also wanted to figure out why the second prince was treating him this way. As far as safety was concerned, Lin Feng, contrary to all expectations, wasn't worried. If they wanted to kill him, they didn't need to use such methods. In front of the second prince, Duan Wuya, Lin Feng was nothing. Nan Shan hadn't thought that Lin Feng would cooperate so easily. Nan Shan was leading the way and they both left. "Young Master Lin here. I already prepared the horses," said Nan Shan while pointing at a place where 2 divine horses were standing. They both looked incredibly mighty. They even had 2 red horns coming from their heads. Valuable horses were really completely different from ordinary ones. Dragon colt horses. When Lin Feng saw these 2 divine horses, he sighed. Dragon colt horses were horses of very high quality. They were not ordinary beasts and were extremely valuable. They were extremely quick and their legs were powerful. Ordinary horses could travel over 500 kilometers a day, whereas dragon colt horses could travel over 5,000 kilometers a day. They were 10 times faster than ordinary horses. They were even faster than Wuxia horses. Indeed, dragon colt horses. Nanshan was pulling a horse towards Lin Feng. He then jumped on the other one, looked at Lin Feng and said, "Young Master Lin, I'll lead the way. Just follow me." While talking, Nanshan pressed on both sides of the abdomen of the horse and left at the speed of light, looking like an illusion. Lin Feng also jumped on the horse. The two silhouettes flew through the Celestial Academy, drawing a great deal of attention. In the imperial city of the Shuiyu country, the most famous place was probably the Imperial Palace. Apart from it, there was another place which also enjoyed a good reputation. The best beverage in the imperial city was the lovesick alcohol. It gave drunk people the impression of being drowned in love. There was only one place where that alcohol could be made: the lovesick forest. Many people in the imperial city only knew the name but had never been to the lovesick forest. Many of them had also never tasted lovesick alcohol either, because the lovesick alcohol couldn't be brought outside of the lovesick forest. That was an unbreakable rule and everybody had to abide by that rule, even noble and wealthy cultivators. Even the members of the imperial clan had to comply with the rules of the lovesick forest. Since the creation of the lovesick forest, the rule had never been changed. The rumors said that the creator of the lovesick alcohol had made it especially for lovers. Besides, for some reason, only wealthy and noble people could enter the lovesick forest. Ordinary people were not permitted entry. At that moment, Nanshan and Lin Feng entered the lovesick forest, but they weren't riding their horses anymore. They had to walk, as it was forbidden to ride a horse inside the forest. When Lin Feng saw the scenery, he entered into a calm and peaceful state of mind. He was surrounded by an emerald forest of bamboo trees, small bridges and flowing water. In the air, there were exquisite fragrances which gave a pleasant feeling to the people with each breath. It was hard to imagine that there were such sacred places in the imperial city. It somehow looked similar to the teacher's peach orchard. But the lovesick forest looked even more mysterious and mystical. What a nice place! Lin Feng was sighing in admiration. Some people were drinking alcohol in the middle of the bamboo forest. They all seemed to be having a great time. The majority of them were people of high status, but they didn't look arrogant because they were inside the lovesick forest, and it wouldn't be unlikely for them to come across people with an even higher social status as theirs. Nanshan guided Lin Feng on a narrow and winding path made of bluestone. They were walking slowly, and after a short moment, a lake appeared in front of Lin Feng. It was surrounded by bamboo trees, grass and plants. Seemed like a dreamscape. In the middle of the lake, there was a broad and vast pavilion. There were many people inside that pavilion. "That is precisely the place. Young Master Lin, you can go there," said Nanshan while smiling. A path made of red wood led to that pavilion. When he finished talking, Nanshan turned around. His silhouette flickered and he vanished in the blink of an eye. He had finished his mission and did not need to stay there anymore. Lin Feng looked perplexed. He looked at that splendid pavilion. The one that he was looking at wasn't the only pavilion. There were other pavilions, but there was nobody inside them. The entire lake was very calm. Only a few voices filled the air every so often. They were coming from the pavilion, which contained a group of people. Lin Feng started walking towards the path made of redwood. When he was about to enter the pavilion, a silhouette appeared behind him in the blink of an eye. When the person saw Lin Feng's clothes, which were torn and ragged, he frowned and said, "Get the hell out of here." Lin Feng turned around and frowned. He looked at that young man. The young man was wearing a magnificent Chong Pao. His hair was tied. He was also very handsome, but he was coldly and arrogantly looking at Lin Feng with disdain.